operation. Up to 60,000 supporters are expected to greet the Indian Prime Minister on the second day of his official visit to Britain. Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria, has sworn in a new cabinet more than 6 months after its presidential election. One of the biggest challenges facing President Muhammadu Buhari is defeating the Islamic insurgency in the northeast of the country. Boko Haram militants have killed thousands and more than 2 million people have fled the fighting. Our correspondent Martin Patience has gained rare access to the city of Maiduguri at the heart of the insurgency.
On the surface, this city appears peaceful, but children here grab what respite they can. Maiduguri's traumatised by a brutal insurgency. Its markets bombed so frequently that people shop late to avoid attacks. Every so often you catch a military convoy heading out to the countryside where the insurgency is at its strongest. These young men know that violence firsthand. They're the sons of bakers killed by Boko Haram. Their villages attacked by the insurgents, they fled with only their lives. Now they've turned to their father's trade to support their families. Taken in by Lawal, a baker in the city. I had to help, he says. What happened to them could happen to me. Among his recruits, Mohammed, we can't forget the morning Boko Haram attacked.
We were woken up by gunshots. At first, I thought it was the military testing their weapons. But then I realized it was a battle. I was terrified. Everyone ran from the house in different directions. For days, I trekked through the bush. It was only when I reached the city that I learned my father had been killed.
It's just past dawn and the curfew has ended in the city, and outside the bakery a crowd of children have gathered, among them kids from displaced families, and they're here to receive a free loaf of bread. If they don't get that bread, then they, along with their families, risk going hungry. And this is what desperation does. You fight to be fed. Boko Haram's brought death and destruction in its pursuit of an Islamic State. It gained international notoriety after kidnapping more than 200 schoolgirls, shown here, after they were forced to convert to Islam. The insurgents kill or kidnap anyone they consider an unbeliever. And that includes Falmata and her 3 daughters who fled their village before they could be captured.
When you're sitting innocently, they come and slaughter you. When you're eating food, they come and take it away. I've never known such a bunch of wicked people.
For Falmata, it's a miserable life. And until she feels safe to return to her home, this insurgency will not be over. Martin Patience, BBC News, Maiduguri.
An alleged member of a New York crime family has been found not guilty of involvement in a 1978 airport robbery that helped inspire the Hollywood mafia movie Goodfellas. Vincent Asaro, who is 80, was cleared of murder, extortion and other crimes. Laura Bicker reports.
Vincent Asaro, reputed mobster, charged with murder, extortion and the armed robbery that inspired the film Goodfellas, found not guilty.
I'd like to thank my 2 lawyers. Without them, I wouldn't be here now. And I'd like to thank the U.S. Marshal Service for treating me great.
And now I think Mr. Asaro intends to go home and spend Thanksgiving with his family.
I got 2 years here and I'm dying to get home.
Mr. Asaro, look at this way. Let's go.
What are you planning to do? What am I planning to do?
Let's go.
Have a good meal with my family.
He was arrested 3 decades after one of America's most notorious unsolved crimes. Armed robbers stole $6 million worth of cash and jewels from the Lufthansa safe at John F. Kennedy Airport. Members of the mob testified against Mr. Asano, painting a picture of revenge mafia-style murders, bodies buried in cement, racketeering and robbery. But the jury were not convinced, and Mr. Asano celebrated. His lawyers raised doubts about the witnesses and their credibility, saying they were professional liars.
Congratulations. Here's your graduation present.
Martin Scorsese's mafia classic Goodfellas centred on the airport robbery. Robert De Niro played the man long believed to be the mastermind, Jimmy Burke. Most of the other suspects disappeared, died, or were killed.
Look at me. Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
Vincent Asaro says he's now looking forward to Thanksgiving with his family. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Washington.
Now, you'll have seen them in period dramas or perhaps been on a tour of them on a weekend trip. But there's a new warning that visiting Britain's stately homes could become a thing of the past. The Historic Houses Association says that they are just too big and expensive for anyone to run, and 70 of them could be closed to the public in the next 5 years. Lucy Byrne reports.
Wentworth Woodhouse is the largest privately owned house in the country, wider even than Buckingham Palace. It's just been bought for over £8 million by a Hong Kong-based investment company. Perhaps the new owners were attracted to its incredible history. It's supposed to be the inspiration for Jane Austen's Pemberley. But the days of glamorous balls and dashing heroes are long gone. After the war, the family could no longer enjoy looking out onto green parkland. Their front lawn was mined for coal, so they stared down on Britain's biggest open-cast pit. The house was bought in 1999 by the architect Clifford Newbold. His plan was to save it from rack and ruin. But the new owners will have a pretty steep repair bill as well. It's thought it will cost £50 million to restore this house to its former glory. Despite assurances from the company, there have been concerns from the heritage sector and local residents about the new owners. Do they have the will to keep restoring the house? And will it still be part of the community?
As long as they sort of make sure it's more accessible to the public, really, because it's such a beautiful building. It would be a shame.
I think it's got quite an attachment to people. We've all got used to it being there and how beautiful it is, and we do them quite regularly through here, and we're just quite we're curious really what's going to happen to it and what it's going to turn into.
The new owners, Lake House Group, say they want to work with heritage organisations in order to save and preserve this magnificent house. But the fact is that these old homes cost a mind-boggling amount to run, as the director of the neighbouring estate explains.
The great houses weren't built by people who had to worry about money, so that they aren't naturally easy to care for or maintain. And you do have to take quite a rigorous commercial approach to succeed in caring for the heritage. When you add heritage to the cost of anything, the costs suddenly start to skyrocket.
For many stately homes, these costs are skyrocketing very quickly. There's a new warning that 20% of them are drowning under the bills and could start to close within the next 5 years. And that's very bad for local economies.
We employ 41,000 full-time equivalents people, and that equates to £286 million into the economy. They're absolutely crucial drivers.
Campaigners hope the government will step in to help ease the pressure. But in the meantime, maybe it is rich foreign investors who can ride to the rescue of these old damsels in distress.
And that was Lucy Burton reporting. Just a reminder, you can get in touch with me and most of the team on Twitter. I'm at BBC Jamie Koo. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, who's always happy to be tweeted, Aaron, with all the latest business news in World Business Report. First, a look at the weather, where you are.
Hello there. As Storm Abigail continues to move northeastwards, just to the north of Scotland, its damaging winds will transfer during the course of the night from the Western Isles to the Northern Isles. But further south, a blustery night to come with also active weather fronts introducing some heavy rain. But colder air as well, plunging south across the UK as Abigail begins to fall away. And then we see a new set of problems through Friday morning. Squally winds associated with a line of heavy, potentially thundery showers. These showers will be really heavy across western parts of England and Wales initially to start the morning off. Maybe some rumbles of thunder, gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour. So pretty atrocious conditions for the morning commute. Amber warnings still in force across the far north of Scotland, mainly for Orkney and for Shetland. gusts again up to around 80, maybe 90 miles an hour. For much of Scotland, for Northern Ireland, blustery showers here, some snow falling over the high ground and through central parts of England, and eastern parts of Wales will have that line of squally showers, potentially thundery with some hail, gusty winds continuing to journey its way eastwards. At this point of the morning, East Anglia and the south east starting off cool but dry with some early sunshine. But it won't be long through the morning. A band of squally showers and strong winds spreads into the southeast as well, eventually clearing away by around midday. And then for most of the country, we're looking at strong, blustery westerly winds and frequent heavy showers, particularly in the north and west, where we'll have snow over the Scottish mountains, maybe to the Pennine top and also to North Wales, as it will feel distinctly cold, certainly than the last few days. And add on the wind, it's going to feel more like these temperatures suggest. Now, Storm Abigail will push away off into Scandinavia, and then we'll start to pick up areas of low pressure off the Atlantic, bringing us west-southwesterly winds, but with it come very active weather fronts, which will bring an awful lot of rain to western areas in particular through Saturday and on into Sunday, especially so for southwest Scotland, Cumbria, northwest England, and also for North Wales, but it will gradually turn milder. But we'll have a new set of problems this weekend. The rain really will be an issue for North Wales, northwest England, southwest Scotland. Persistent heavy rain is likely to cause some flooding, so do keep tuned to the weather forecast.
Get up to speed with all the day's sports. Don't miss Sports Day tonight at 6:30 on the BBC News Channel.
He's in exotic land, in the far reaches of Northern Europe, a place of unbelievable history, myth and legend.
I'm in Ireland.
Join Simon Reeve as he discovers a different kind of island in a two-part series.
Why barefoot?
Say it's the proper way to do it.
We just want to live in the present and look towards the future.
An island that I really didn't know.
Island with Simon Reeve starts Sunday the 22nd of November on BBC Two.
Discover how World War I changed your world. Uncover amazing stories about the people and places where you live. These stories, told through photos, audio and film, many courtesy of Imperial War Museums, are now available in the BBC World War I at Home interactive ebook. It's free, and to find out how to download the ebook, visit bbc.co.uk/WW1.
This is BBC World News, the headlines. The United States says it's carried out an airstrike in Syria targeting the Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John, who appeared in videos showing Western hostages being beheaded. It's not clear whether he was killed. Kurdish forces say they are poised to recapture the town of Sinjar in northern Iraq from the Islamic State group. They say they have seized parts of an important highway used by IS to move weapons and troops between Syria and Iraq. And Islamic State has said it was responsible for 2 suicide bomb attacks in the Lebanese capital Beirut. More than 40 people were killed in a district known as a stronghold of Hezbollah, which is fighting IS in Syria. On the second day of the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Britain, he is due to address a crowd of 60,000 people at London's Wembley Stadium. There are also likely to be protests against mistreatment of minorities in India. Those are the latest headlines from BBC World News. Now for all the latest financial news with Aaron and World Business Report.
Oh, an economy choked by austerity, or one that's just failed to reform. No end to the misery for Greece as it slides back towards recession. Plus turning breakdowns into big bucks. Yeah, why the AA is answering the call of India's new motorists. Good morning, Britain. Hello, world. I'm Aaron Hazelhurst. Here we go. Lots going on. You give me, how long have I got? I've got about 9 minutes. You give me that, and I will give you a fascinating and exciting snapshot of all the latest in the world of business and money. Guess what? Greece is back in the headlines, because the growing fears that the country is going to slip back into recession. Now, some are blaming the harsh austerity imposed by the EU and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, for all that money that they've been lending. Others say, well, it's a failure by Athens and the government to stick to its reforms. Either way, the suffering of the Greek people is set to continue. I put some numbers together. I'm going to show you these. Take a look at this. Greece returned to economic growth last year. That was after a 6-year slump. But it does look like that recovery is over because its economic numbers, its GDP figures, gross domestic product, for the last 3 months, basically, to September, they're out in a few hours' time, and they are expected to show this right here, that the Greek economy kind of went backwards. It shrank by 1% compared to, say, the last 3-month period. And if that's the case, well, then the growth is pretty much wiped out. And it is a trend that could be set to continue because both the European Commission and the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, warned that Greek GDP, its economy, will end the year down nearly 1.5% with a similar fall again next year. Also, we know this, a quarter of the Greek workforce are still without a job, over twice the EU average, and almost half of those are under 25 years old. No job. On Thursday, yesterday, we saw, again, very similar pictures. Greece was paralysed by a general strike that's over throwing lots of stick throwing and stone over these new austerity measures. 20,000 protesters taking to the streets in central Athens. Trade union leaders and many Greeks have turned on Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras and his Syriza party, been accusing them of basically caving in to the lenders, to the EU and to the IMF. Here's what some of those protesters had to say yesterday. Take a look.
I believe strikes can backfire on workers, but there are some moments when people need to react. This is the time when people need to react. Enough already with the taxes, enough with the double talk. They need to let us breathe.
It's an expression of worry about the uncertainty and insecurity that prevails in our country and for the living standards of our society and people.
Enough with cuts to our pensions and wages. The Greek people must rise up and take to the streets because the situation is only going to get worse.
These measures that the government wants to pass are measures that will bury us.
Okay, well, some angry people. Let's get more. Vicky Price is Chief Economics Advisor, I should say, for the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Vicky, always good to have you in the studio. Thanks for getting up so early for this. We're just listening to some of the protesters, obviously not very happy. Here's the problem from outside as we look at that and we go, hang on, but Greece signed up to this, right? They had a referendum. People voted in favour of the government to stay in the EU, so to take on board the austerity. All that money that Greece has been getting doesn't come for free.
Well, the truth is, of course, that not everyone voted for austerity, and they don't like it more generally. The interesting thing is that quite a lot of the demonstrations were supported by Syriza, the ruling party. So there's a bit of schizophrenia in Greece, which is going on still to this day, in terms of what do we really want from all these arrangements we've made. But everyone who's looked at this, the demonstrations were quite peaceful. There were a few anarchists, as usual. But the interesting thing is that if it had been New Democracy, in other words, the right-wing party that had won, we would have had paralysis in Greece, much, much bigger problems. But of course, it is Syriza, so there is a limit to the extent of the demonstrations that we're going to be seeing. So in some way, what we're seeing is what we're going to be getting, really, and it's not going to get much worse.
No, sure. Particular sticking point seems at the moment we've got Greece's European peers, so all the other countries are kind of once again venting their frustration that Athens is acting too slow on the reforms. But one of the sticking points seems to be Athens wants to protect those households who can't afford their mortgage. They basically want to write off their mortgage debt. And Europe's not going to have that, surely.
It is a real problem. Of course, lots of Greeks have just stopped paying any interest that's due on loads of their debt, and just the mortgages, but also everything else, because they simply haven't had the money to do so. So they've been paying taxes, but they've actually not kept up with their payment schedules that they should have had. Now the question is, what do you do with all these houses that people have? Their primary property, that's the real issue. Do they lose the primary property as well as maybe anything else that they may have because they can't pay back? And the issue is that these properties that people have are just not worth worth an awful lot right now. The market has slumped. What will banks do with all those houses going to acquire? It makes no real sense because, of course, what's going to happen is that they will have to offload those, a little bit like what's been going on in Ireland. What they really should be looking at is how to restructure banks, how to do something about the sort of bad debts that are there. Have a real bad bank, which hasn't happened.
No, it hasn't happened. They've got to do something about the banks, right? These banks need 14.5 billion euros within the next matter of weeks, or they're all going to basically close shop, and we've seen that. But all of this ugliness, if you will, and the pain that the Greeks are feeling, is this are we getting one step closer to the realization from the rest of the world that Greece is going to have to write off some of this debt, and we're going to have to suck it up and cop it?
Absolutely, but you have to go through various paces. You have to clean the banks up. The recapitalisation isn't going to be anything like as large as people had expected, so at least we'll get there. We've just seen the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, saying that they were going to participate in funding some of this recapitalisation, which is a sign of adding a bit of trust and confidence to the whole system. So I think we will be, through various steps, getting there, but we have to do that first, and then I think absolutely looking again at the debt situation in Greece is going to be a must.
Okay. Vicky, always a pleasure. You know, it's a short and sweet program, but we appreciate your time. Thanks very much for joining us there. Okay, but let's swiftly move on, because as you've been hearing, of course, the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, he continues his trip right here in the UK today, and he's keen, very keen to convince British firms to come and do business in his country. From, what do we got? We got Triumph Motorbikes, Costa Coffee, to Vodafone and JCB, just some well-known UK names already operating there. And now another famous brand, it's testing the market, trying to cash in on India's growing car ownership. The BBC's Ramzan Kamali has this for you.
If you break down in the UK, the chances are you'll call out the AA. It's the biggest roadside assistance company in the country. It has 14 million customers, and last year it came to the aid of 3.5 million motorists who found themselves in distress. It's a very British company, but now it's got its sights on a brand new market. The roads of India's cities are already pretty congested, but car ownership is on the rise. Every month, about 150,000 new cars are sold across India. But while those vehicles will have warranties and breakdown cover, it's estimated that more than 20 million cars do not. And that gap in the market is why the AA has bought just under half of a local breakdown business.
We're very excited about the prospects for India. It's a very large marketplace. We think the Indian market will be 3 times the size of the UK market over the next 3 or 4 years.
There won't be any of the AA's famous yellow trucks on the road, but already you'll find its logo on vans belonging to TVS, its new partner.
We felt that we needed a local partner with local contacts, with local expertise, and we think that the business will benefit from our know-how and experience. TVS breakdown business has been going 10 years, and we've been going 110 years, so we do have a lot of knowledge, experience and technology.
And it's that technology which appeals to TVS. Today, Indian drivers tend to call the firm only when a problem occurs. But TVS wants motorists to pay in advance for breakdown membership. It sees the AA's know-how as a big selling point.
Brands like Ola and Uber have already changed the customer experience. So the customer wants to know when he calls you, where is my service technician coming in service, so that he can handle his anxiety better. I think when AA today stands and says I can deliver in 38 minutes, I want to deliver the same promise in India and in emerging markets. And that's where the technology can make a big difference.
Local garages still have the bulk of India's market when it comes to car repairs. Changing that habit and selling the idea of a recovery service run by 2 well-known established brands will determine if this India-Britain venture proves more than a quick fix. Ramzan Karmali, BBC News.
There you go. Let me just leave you with this story. Shares of the Swiss agricultural chemicals giant Syngenta, they have soared, in the US on reports of a massive takeover bid by, guess what, a Chinese rival. According to Bloomberg, Syngenta has rejected the $42 billion offer by ChemChina, citing regulatory concerns. And it follows a similar offer from the US rival, Monsanto, which was withdrawn after Syngenta dismissed it as too low. So could be a bit of a bidding war going on. We'll take a quick, we'll keep across that, take a quick flash of the markets. You can see the markets in Asia down. Same story, commodity prices are down, worries about China, and then US interest rates, all very ho-hum, isn't it? Follow me on Twitter. You can get me at BBC Aaron. I'll be back with James to take a look at the papers from around the world. Ta-da.
The BBC has learned that ministers here in the UK are considering whether homeopathy should be put on a blacklist of treatments that GPs are banned from prescribing. Opponents say the NHS is wasting millions on homeopathy, and it's believed that the government will launch a consultation on the treatments next year. Lisa Hamperley reports.
The NHS spends around £4 million a year on homeopathy, despite saying there's no good quality proof that it works. A charity which describes itself as promoting evidence-based science has challenged that discrepancy, threatening to take the NHS to court if it continues to fund the treatment.
Doctors really should be prescribing medicines that are known to work. Now, homeopathy is a great example of a medicine that is not known to work. In fact, it is known not to work, and yet the National Health Service spends millions of pounds on it.
But supporters of the treatment dispute that.
We know from the science that actually when GPs incorporate homeopathic medicine, they get better results. Either they get the same results with less drugs, or the patients just get better quicker.
Drugs can be blacklisted for a range of reasons, among them the presence of cheaper alternatives, or because they're not considered to be effective. It wouldn't affect people buying them over the counter or privately. The Minister for Life Sciences, George Freeman, told the BBC, "We have a duty to make sure we spend NHS funds on the most effective treatments, and that we expect to consult on proposals in due course." The BBC understands that consultation will start next year. Lisa Hamperley, BBC News.
Coming up at 6 o'clock on Breakfast, Nagaman Chetty and Charlie State will have all the day's news, business and sport. They'll also have more on the investigation into the failed charity Kids Company. Ministers say it's staggering that the government gave it more than £40 million of public money over 13 years. This as further claims of inappropriate spending come from a former worker at the charity. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning will have more. I'm James Kimarasamy. The top stories this hour. American forces say they've carried out an airstrike in Syria, targeting the Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John. He's thought to be a Kuwaiti British man called Mohammed Emwazi. A Pentagon spokesman said they were assessing the results of Thursday's operation to determine whether he was killed. Kurdish forces in northern Iraq have told the BBC they expect very soon to recapture the town of Sinjar from the jihadists of Islamic State. The Kurds say they have cut off Sinjar on 3 sides and seized large areas of territory, forcing the jihadists to retreat. IS have been fighting back with booby traps and suicide bombs. And some news just in from Myanmar. The opposition National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, has won a majority of seats in both houses of parliament. That means that they will be able to nominate candidates for the presidency and to form a government. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to be greeted by tens of thousands of exuberant fans at Wembley Stadium on the second day of his visit to the UK. There are also expected to be protests by people angry at a perceived rise in intolerance in India. Now, time for our paper review. And the hello, Aaron. And the South China Morning. Yeah, sorry.
Next time with enthusiasm.
I know. We've already chatted this morning, and we can chat some more. The South China Morning Post is focused on money matters. It says that growth in government spending has hit a 3-year high in an attempt to offset the economic slowdown. The paper also pictures the new 100 yuan note. There's a fan of it, a couple of fans of it.
A new note. Love it. The International New York Times features this picture of course, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi inspecting an honour guard here in London during that visit, of course. Now, the paper says several business deals between the two nations are expected to be signed.
The Times, meanwhile, leads with the migrant crisis. The paper says that Europe's system of open borders is under serious threat.
Apple's plans to introduce a new payment system allowing users to zap money to one another using their phones rather than cash is featured on the Wall Street Journal.
Now, older people could be offered mortgages that last into their 80s and 90s. That's a top story in the Daily Telegraph.
Paying off a mortgage when you're 90? Oh. I won't even be around. The same paper reports that in an attempt to discourage younger drivers who aren't already Right? Okay, basically this is about aren't ready to fail your test. It's going to cost them more, basically. If you fail once, you've got to go back. It's going to cost you more, although you could get money back if you pass on the first time.
Right, more on that a bit.
We don't even need to talk about that story.
Well, indeed, we're plenty to talk about. But joining us to talk about all this is Alpesh Patel, CEO of Pryfinium Partners. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Alpesh, happy Friday.
Thank you, you too.
All right, shall we start with China then?
Yeah.
We've seen those pictures of the new notes, but the story on the front of the South China Morning Post is about credit drying up in China.
Yeah, the reason this is of global importance, and it wouldn't have been 10, 20, 30 years ago, is we better pray the Chinese get this right. What they're saying is that consumer spending has decreased. In order to maintain that demand, the government is increasing their spending. Let's hope they get their maths right on this, because otherwise it's going to impact us in Europe and in North America, the biggest economies in the world, more than it ever would have done so. Yep. And the other thing you've got to remember with the Chinese is social unrest is what they're actually trying to manage. It's not the economy so much as ensuring that there isn't social unrest in that vast, diverse country. And that's what they're trying to do with this. But most importantly, I just pray they get the figures right on this.
You say pray because there's a bit of a problem, because we know Beijing has been making attempts over many years now to remodel the economy, right? They want to be less of the world's factory floor, and they want to be more consumer driven. If they want to be consumer driven, but already, we're starting to see consumers not spend as much, tighten their belts.
I tell you what, I'd rather that they were doing government spending than that they were boosting consumer credit, because we know how that's worked out for us in the West.
Well, exactly.
And they've got to manage it being a consumer economy for exactly that reason. I think they've learned the lessons from the West, which is why I think they're shoring up with government spending, because that investment long-term into their infrastructure is very much needed by that country. And also, I just hope that what we don't do is use that capital to keep on shoring up their economy and dumping, because they do use significant amounts of their spending to artificially deflate their currency and therefore make their exports that much cheaper and dump their goods on the West and make it impossible for us to compete on a level playing field. I'd rather spend their money on investments than they did on manipulating their currency.
Right, well, should we move on to other investments? And
money.
Money.
You want the money. You're forgetting the 100 yuan.
Yeah, new 100 yuan notes.
But no. This is meant to make it easy. Harder to counterfeit, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, China, it's a totalitarian dictatorship with a dodgy human rights record. Who's got the guts to counterfeit?
I know.
You know what I mean?
Sorry,
you're already pretty brave. But yes, it's obviously a critical issue. And it's becoming an increasingly modern economy, of course. And as you evolve, these are the kinds of measures you need to take. But like I said, I'd be scared senseless of committing any criminal act in China.
Right.
Go for it.
Yeah, no crimes. No crimes in China. We move on to the Modi visit. Obviously, huge news here. Big deals already signed. I mean, what for you is the key?
I think one of the key aspects, I work with the UK government's UK Trade and Investment arm and something called the Global Entrepreneur Programme, where we bring in entrepreneurs from India. We have never seen more entrepreneurs out of India wanting to set up their global headquarters in the UK. So for all the talk of India and its growth, we've got Indians of global ambition, not just looking at the Indian market, but looking to go global and access the EU from a UK base. And more of them set up here in the UK as their headquarters than any other country in Europe. And I think that hasn't really been drawn out as much as I would have wished it to have been. And that's fantastic news for Britain, because of course it's jobs, it's taxation, it's all those positive aspects. So it's money coming over here from India, not just us exporting over there.
Is that straightforward? Are there any barriers or anything during this trip that can be discussed on that front?
Well, actually, what we want to do is get even more of those companies setting up over here. The advantage to us in Britain is the ease of doing business. Now, India is improving in terms of its ease of doing business, but it's so many tiers or steps under the ladder behind Britain that actually for a long time we're going to have that advantage. But it's actually just positive. We've not seen any major hurdles. I mean, both countries are working hand in hand in reducing any of the sort of regulatory problems of investing and trading with both countries. But it's all been moving in the right direction. Every business person I speak to is overwhelmingly positive because of this Prime Minister being so energetic about that.
Well, you say all that, but if you look at the numbers, Britain used to be in the top 10 trading partners with India. It's now 12. Belgium trades more with India than the UK, and the number of Indian students want to study in the UK, despite having 4 of the best institutions in the world in the top 10 here in the UK, that's dropped by half. This number of students, Indian students...
Let's deal with the Belgium statistics.
How does Belgium beat you?
Diamonds, Antwerp. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of Indians in Antwerp polishing the diamonds which come from India, and they go back. I mean, some of these trade figures, whereas Britain has a diverse base of trade and investment with India. But you're absolutely right. Whilst we've doubled up trade and investment over the last 10 years, we want that to be double even more because of those close links. It's extraordinary that it isn't even greater. Now, there's a lot of people working on making it be even greater between the two countries in terms of trade and investment, but the direction is definitely clear. It's increasing year on year on year.
Okay. Let's move on to the story at the front of the Times. Borders in crisis after migrant talks fail. These are these talks in Malta with African countries and the EU leaders. There was nearly $2.2 billion pledged by EU leaders to try and help with this, but it seems that there are some big barriers still.
I'll tell you what worries me the most. There's a line in that report: Slovenia razor wire with Croatia. Yeah. So much for the EU dream of open borders. And I think that tells you everything, what's happening on the ground, what the reality is. In actual fact, the EU might be able to learn from India a bit, which is a country which has managed to incorporate a vast diversity of religions and cultures with relatively little problem. But Europe is having a huge problem. I wanted to ask the journalist who wrote this, when you're talking about EU and migration, the major problem seems to be from Africa. Is there a single African country which hasn't been colonized by an EU country? It's just basically they're coming home to roost. And that's what's happening. And the EU putting up razor wires, it's got big problems. It's only going to get worse.
Okay, let's because our time is clicking up, ticking, I should say. Apple, Apple playing its role in our cashless, or what's fast becoming cashless society, right?
Yeah, and the banks are not too happy about this because Apple are going to make it easier for us to transfer money and basically bypass the banks. And thank God, how long have the banks been paying their employees and not investing in technology? I was looking at the share of Citigroup. It's at the same price it was 20 years ago, because every time they earn any money, they give it to the employees. They don't invest in technology. Not just Apple, Facebook, let alone, have you tried converting currency at a bank and the rip-off rates you get? Well, thank God. And right now, forget banking shares. You better put it in technology, because actually investing in technology means you're going to be investing in the future of finance. The banks are just not innovating. They're not innovating. They're going to get wiped out at this rate, and thank God.
There you go.
On the banks.
Sorry, Bates, if you're watching out there.
We're going to wrap it up. We have to wrap it up there, unfortunately. Alpesh, thanks so much for being back with us again.
Yeah. Hey, did you? No, I know. How long we got? Oh, we're counting down. Did you pass your driver's test first time?
First time.
Oh, yeah, you're very clever.
We're all happy drivers. Thanks very much for watching.
We'll see you soon.
See you
Top
soon.
of the hour.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Hello there. Storm Abigail will pack quite a punch across the north and northwest corner of Scotland during the course of Thursday night and into the early hours of Friday morning as well. But it's not just the winds across the north which are causing the problem. We've also got gusty winds further south and also very active weather fronts introducing some really heavy squally showers. As we head through Friday, something I haven't seen for a while is a plunge of colder air, which will be noticeable right across the UK. But into Friday morning, we have issues with squally winds and very heavy showers across England and Wales. Some torrential downpours, gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour initially across Western England and Wales through the first part of the morning could cause some issues with the early morning commute. But across the north of the UK, we still have amber warnings in force up until midday for the Northern Isles here. The winds will still be very strong through the morning. Further south, blustery showers, some of them heavy, and some snow falling over the Scottish mountains as well. There's that line of squally showers across central parts of England by this point of the morning, maybe even some hail and some rumbles of thunder with it too. But like I mentioned, the winds will be very strong as that band of showers moves through. Quite a chilly feel to things as well. East Anglia in the southeast starting off dry with some sunshine, but that's a squally band of rain and strong gusty winds will reach the southeast corner as well as the morning progresses. And then for the rest of Friday, we're looking at a cold, blustery day, strong winds, gale force at times, large waves crashing on the coast there of northern and western Scotland, and frequent showers in the north and the west, some of them heavy with hail and thunder, snow over the high ground, and a cold feel to things. Add on that wind, it's going to feel more like 1 to 8 Celsius across the UK. Now we lose Abigail, pushes off in towards Scandinavia, and then we pick up the mild west-south-westerlies again. But these areas of low pressure and their active weather fronts are set to bring western parts of the UK a lot of rain during the course of the weekend. Really could cause some problems, in particular for western Scotland, northwest England, western Wales. With it comes milder air, but the rain really will be an issue through Saturday, and the next weather system pushing through on Sunday introduces further very heavy rain across the north and the west. And again, a milder feel to things with temperatures quite widely into the mid-teens Celsius. But just to recap into the weekend, we've got a new set of problems with the rain, in particular for North Wales, northwest England, particularly Cumbria and southwest Scotland, where persistent heavy rain is likely to cause flooding. So do keep tuned to the weather forecast.
We do BBC School Report every year. My students get really into it. Even at lunch, you see them running around, doing interviews and making news reports. They're really engaging with the world around them. And it builds so many skills, researching stories, discussing and presenting, but also giving them memories for life. Plus, as a teacher, it's really not that hard. The resources and lesson plans on the website are so easy to use. Just sign up at the BBC School Report website.
They took on the corrupt establishment of the day, stylish highwaymen.
The masked horseback robber who stole hard cash.
Rebel pirates.
It was the pirate, and not Britannia, who really ruled the waves.
And artful dodgers.
Closer to home, rogues threatened the lives and livelihoods of ordinary citizens.
From the lowest to the highest, there was contempt for the rule of law.
Britain's Outlaws, a 3-part series. Coming soon on BBC 4 and BBC 4 HD.
We live in a world ablaze with colour. I'm Dr. Helen Chersky, and I'm fascinated by colour. In this series, I'm going to uncover exactly what it is, how it works, and how it has written the story of our planet.
Colour, the spectrum of science, continues Wednesday at 9 on BBC 4.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Naga Manchetti in Charlie State.
US forces carry out a drone strike targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
The attack on a vehicle believed to be carrying Mohammed Amwazi took place near the Syrian city of Raqqa. Pentagon says it's not yet clear if he's been killed.
Good morning. It's Friday the 13th of November.
Also this morning, an end to homeopathy on the NHS. Ministers consider banning doctors in England from prescribing it to patients.
Every new police officer in England and Wales will need to have a degree under plans being put forward by the College of Policing.
Good morning. The UK Tax Authority is to close hundreds of local offices, putting thousands of jobs at risk. It says it will open new regional centres instead, but critics say the closures could cause tax collection chaos.
Good morning. In the sport, the World Cup winning coach Jake White tells the BBC that he would take the England rugby head coach job if it was offered to him. The South African led his home nation to World Cup success in 2009.
So Terry Wogan will miss Children in Need tonight, first time since 1980 because of back problems. But of course, the show goes on.
And Carol has the weather for us.
Good morning. The storm force winds or severe gales across the north of the country will slowly moderate through the course of today, but for all of us it is going to be a windy day. There will be some heavy showers around, some with hail and also thunder, and it's going to feel much colder today than of late. I'll have more details in 15 minutes.
See you then, Carol.
Good morning. First, our main story. In the past few hours, the Pentagon has announced that US forces have carried out an airstrike targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
It happened near the Syrian city of Raqqa and was aimed at a vehicle. A worldwide hunt was launched for Mohammed Emwazi after he was seen in videos of the beheadings of Western hostages.
Our North America correspondent Laura Wicker is in Washington for us now. Laura, the details of this attack, as we have them, only released in the last few hours. Tell us what we know at this stage.
Well, the Pentagon says this was a targeted attack. They were aiming at Jihadi John. They say that it was a drone strike on a vehicle, and we understand from a senior Pentagon source that they may have been watching Jihadi John for some time. This is one of several strikes that they're carrying out amongst Islamic State militants to try to take away Islamic State leaders. And certainly when it comes to Jihadi John, we know him from those sinister videos, that masked figure threatening Western hostages, and he's thought to be involved in the murders of several high-profile victims, including the American journalist James Foley and the British aid workers David Haines and Alan Hennings. And certainly when those murders became known, here, President Obama said it was something they would never forget. Now, the Pentagon, and certainly a senior source within the Pentagon, says that this was a great strike. Why it's so important? Well, if they have got their man and they're still assessing and looking at intelligence to figure out whether or not they have killed this man, if they saved him, it will be the most high-profile figure they have killed since strikes began a year ago.
Laura, for the moment, thank you.
The BBC has learned that ministers are considering whether homeopathy should be added to a blacklist of treatments that doctors in England are banned from prescribing.
Homeopathy is based on the idea that diluting substances which cause illness can help people to heal. One example is using pollen to help cure hay fever. Lisa Hamperley reports.
The NHS spends around £4 million a year on homeopathy, despite saying there's no good quality proof that it works. A charity which describes itself as promoting evidence-based science has challenged that discrepancy, threatening to take the NHS to court if it continues to fund the treatment.
Doctors really should be prescribing medicines that are known to work. Now, homeopathy is a great example of a medicine that is not known to work. In fact, it is known not to work, and yet the National Health Service spends millions of pounds on it.
But supporters of the treatment dispute that.
We know from the science that actually when GPs incorporate homeopathic medicine, they get better results. Either they get the same results with less drugs, or the patients just get better quicker.
Drugs can be blacklisted for a range of reasons, among them the presence of cheaper alternatives, or because they're not considered to be effective. It wouldn't affect people buying them over the counter or privately. The Minister for Life Sciences, George Freeman, told the BBC, "We have a duty to make sure we spend NHS funds on the most effective treatments, and that we expect to consult on proposals in due course." The BBC understands that consultation will start next year. Lisa Hamperley, BBC News.
The couple who killed Becky Watts will be sentenced today at Bristol Crown Court. Earlier this week, a jury took less than 4 hours to find 28-year-old Nathan Matthews guilty of his stepsister's murder and 21-year-old Shauna Hall guilty of manslaughter. The teenager was strangled to death in February. Her body was found with more than 40 injuries.
Police officers in England and Wales could need a degree-level education under plans being put forward by the College of Policing.
The organisation says the job is as difficult as professions which only accept graduates, but at the moment only a minority of successful candidates have degrees. Qureshi reports.
This would represent the biggest shake-up in policing for years.
There are currently no formal educational requirements for entering the service. Some forces require applicants to have A-levels or a certificate in policing. Others demand experience in a policing role. Under today's proposals, applicants would need to complete a degree in practical policing or a conversion course. The College of Policing says being a police officer is a job of degree-level complexity, as difficult professions such as social work and nursing, which only accept graduates. The Police Federation, which represents most officers, says it fundamentally disagrees with the plan. It says it would exclude hard-to-reach groups and those who can't afford to pay for a university course. If the college gets its way, a pilot scheme could run from 2017, with a rollout across every force in England and Wales 2 years later. Nick Qureshi, BBC News.
5 days after an historic vote in Myanmar, the party of former Burmese political prisoner Aung San Suu Kyi has now won enough seats to choose the country's next president. It was the first contested vote in 25 years. The new parliament will not convene until late January, when a new president will be chosen.
A pledge to halve the number of stillbirths in England by 2030 will be announced by the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt today. In 2013, the UK had one of the highest rates of stillbirths in Europe. The government has said that it will pledge more than £4 million to ensure best practice across the NHS.
Twin bomb attacks in Lebanon have killed at least 41 people and wounded more than 200 others in a residential area of southern Beirut. Suicide bombers claiming to be from so-called IS carried out the attack close to a popular shopping centre. It's the worst bombing in Beirut since Lebanon's civil war ended in 1990.
Storm Abigail has swept across parts of the UK, bringing with it winds of up to 90 miles an hour. Every school in the Western Isles and Shetland will be closed to pupils today because of the expected arrival of Storm Abigail. Nearly 60 primary and secondary schools will be affected.
Ministers investigating the charity Kids Company says it's staggering the government gave it more than £40 million of public money over 13 years. The report from the Public Accounts Committee has been published as further claims have emerged from a former worker at the charity about inappropriate spending.
The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will speak to some 60,000 people at an event at Wembley Stadium on the second day of his visit to the UK.
Britain and India have signed trade deals worth at least £9 billion. However, Mr Modi's visit to the UK has not been welcomed by some human rights activists. Our India correspondent Justin Rowlett reports.
The Indian Prime Minister's motorcade sweeps into the Guildhall in the heart of the City of London. This visit is all about commerce.
If India wants a partner to help finance its ambitious plans, you've come to the right place.
Mr Cameron and Mr Modi have agreed billions of pounds worth of business deals and new ways for Indian businesses to raise money using London's financial expertise.
Businesses know how to grow with each other. That is the reason that the UK is among India's major trading partners.
Today comes the fun part. Lunch with the Queen and a huge rally hosted by supporters of his brand of Hindu nationalism at Wembley Stadium. But Mr Modi is a controversial figure. There were protesters outside Downing Street yesterday, and there'll be even more outside Wembley today. I understand the authorities are expecting more than 15,000 people. Mr Cameron will be hoping it won't disrupt what has been a successful visit so far. Justin Rowlett, BBC News.
Sir Terry Wogan has been forced to pull out of presenting this year's Children in Need because of back problems. Now, he's hosted every live show since the event began in 1980 and said in a statement, "We miss our wonderful, inspiring evening together, but I'll be with you, watching, cheering and donating to a magnificent cause."
And we will miss him too as well. Since 1980, every Children in Need. We wish him well. Hope he gets better soon. Carol will have the weather for us in a few minutes' time.
Time to talk to Mike, though, and still questions about who's going to take over.
Yeah, well, we have a candidate who seems that he would quite like the job, Jake White, but the trouble is he's had it twice before and been turned down, so he's being a bit coy, saying, I'm not going to apply this time. But if the phone rings, well, yeah, go on then, I'll take it. That's what he's telling the BBC. Yeah, if England are looking for someone who has won the World Cup, then Jake White fits the bill. He has told the Beeb that he would take the England job if he was offered it. The South African led his home nation to World Cup success back in 2009, beating England in the final in Paris, of course. He is currently coaching the French side Montpellier. But last night at the Stoop in London, Montpellier were easily beaten by Harlequins in the first European club match of the season. Now in football, England are one of 3 home nations playing football friendlies tonight. They take on European champion Spain in Alicante. Wales and Northern Ireland are warming up the first Euros with games against the Netherlands and Latvia. And how about this for an upset? 15-year-old Yang Bingtao from China has knocked the former world champion Sean Murphy out of the Champion of Champions snooker tournament in Coventry. Murphy, the number 4, says the school is a great champion of the future. But for next year, it's back to school in China. Now in the papers, plenty more on speculation about who's going to replace Stuart Lancaster as England head coach. It seems that the Southern Hemisphere candidates are all out of the running. They don't want the job. World's best coaches turn their backs on England, the likes of Graham Henry there and Steve Hansen saying no, they're not interested. But how about, this would be controversial, wouldn't it? Warren Gatland, the Welsh coach, he is contracted with Wales until 2019. Then it's expected to be back to New Zealand. But here in the Mail, apparently the Mail understands that Gatland would be open to listening at least to anything that England have to say. The other story here on the Mail doing the rounds is why Lewis Hamilton crashed his car on Tuesday and why he was late indeed to get the plane to Brazil for the penultimate Grand Prix of the season. And Inside the Sun, he's quoted here as saying, no, it was a result of heavy partying and not much rest for a week and a half. That was the week after Mexico and the party, and we drank a lot, apparently. And so he was a bit tired, a bit under the weather after too many late nights, and hence he had that little prang in his rather expensive car.
Well, he's being honest, isn't he?
He is, absolutely. You've got to admire his honesty, and you can't blame him.
And he's worked hard.
After becoming world champion for the 3rd time.
Yeah, it's odd one though, isn't it, when you've still got another race
2 races to go. Yeah,
there's
2 more races for that, isn't it? Yeah. But he has made Brazil now, so he will be in the lineup. He just missed a corporate event, apparently.
Good. Oh, not good, but I mean, yeah, well, there you go. Thanks, Mike.
Let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? The front page of The Independent has a picture here of Comrade Bala, who has been accused of keeping women under slavery conditions, controlling women in South London, and abusing some women and being accused of that, and raping some of his female followers and keeping a daughter captive for 30 years. The headline here is Corbyn steals the march on Labour plotters. Plan change to election rules is a blow, The Independent says, to moderates who are hoping to oust him as leader.
Front page of The Guardian, worth pointing out, of course, because the story about the US drone airstrike on Jihadi John came in around 3 o'clock this morning, so it's not in any of the front pages this morning. That's our lead story this morning. But the main picture on The Guardian there, you may have seen it, George Clooney was in Edinburgh yesterday, and he was helping out at a sandwich shop that helps homeless people. That's one of the selfies that we've taken there. And the main story is the Health Secretary and the worries over strike action by junior doctors, which is an ongoing issue at the moment.
The Sports Minister Tracy Crouch has given advice, or said that she has given advice to claimants who've said they won't be able to survive after losing tax credits. And she said that some workers who are complaining about tax credit cuts should cancel their pay TV subscriptions, saying that they're struggling financially should go without luxuries.
And on the front page of the Telegraph, again, the doctor story making the front page, junior doctors threatening the first all-out strike in the history of the NHS, unions escalating their war with ministers over new contracts. I meant to draw attention on the front page of The Guardian there. It's only just a picture, really. Who's that up there? Who's this fella? Who's that?
Oh, I'm so excited today.
It's Prince, isn't it?
It's Prince.
And we'll explain later why that's... I'm just curious as to what Naga thinks, you know.
I think it's amazing. Basically, he's just announced some piano tour dates. Yes. And so his tickets go on sale. And it's always a big thing when Prince performs. But we're excited because he's one of my childhood heroes.
Yes, and a very iconic figure, isn't he? With
Absolutely.
A very unique look about
Genius in music, but that's just my humble opinion. Ben?
Yeah, those pictures are well worth seeing. That's all.
We'll show them later.
Morning, both. Just want to start with a story in the front of the Financial Times. This fresh wave of selling engulfs the markets, it says, and that's because the FTSE 100, the index of our 100 leading companies, ending down nearly 2% yesterday. That's because there's been ongoing fears about China, but also falling commodity prices. Copper, which, as it says here, barometer for global growth, fell pretty sharply, a 6-year low yesterday. Oil was down at nearly 20%, of course, too. But someone who is not feeling the pain, look at that there. The billionaire in Hong Kong spending $77 million on that diamond, actually buying 2 diamonds over the past couple of days for his 7-year-old daughter. Not a bad gift for his 7-year-old daughter, but nonetheless spending £48.5 million on one of them. And 28.5 on another one. So not bad if you're just 7 years old getting that as your birthday present. Now, if you're ever wondering why the roads are all so congested, well, apparently it's because we're spending too much time shopping online. Online delivery vans slow the urban traffic to a crawl. It says that's because the number of miles covered by vans has risen by 6%, delivering all of that stuff that we've been buying online. Just one story I want to show you here. The grumpy landlord in North London, who has banned 800 locals from his pub because they've been backing a move to list that pub. They said that they wanted to list the very old pub and they wanted to stop it falling into the hands of developers. But he's described them as hypocrites in cardigans who only drink half pints. So he's clearly not very happy because, of course, if you're a listed building, it means you've got to apply for permission to be able to sell it or to renovate it, that sort of thing.
800 people is a lot to ban, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I wonder how popular it is, because we always talk about how pubs are suffering from a fall in trade. If you can ban 800 and still have a viable business, it's obviously a good pub to be in.
Yeah.
Ben, thanks very much.
Let's see time now, 17 minutes past 6. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. Our main stories this morning. US forces have carried out an airstrike in Syria, targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
Storm Abigail sweeps across parts of the UK, bringing with it winds of up to 90 miles an hour. Well, let's carry on talking about Storm Abigail. Carol, you were keeping us abreast of what to expect yesterday. What are the after effects today? Good morning, by the way.
Good morning, both. Good morning to you as well. Well, I'm glad to say Abigail will continue to push northeastwards and will continue to fill and weaken, but she's still packing a bit of a punch at the moment. And you can see from the isobars on this chart, it still is going to be a windy day. We've also got a front which is moving across England and Wales. That's going to introduce some squally conditions, meaning sudden gusts of strong wind and also some rain. And we've had quite a bit of rain through the course of the night, as well as the storm force winds across the north and the northwest of Scotland. So the rain's been steadily pouring down. With that combination, if you are travelling this morning, do take extra care on the roads. We've got squally winds, thundery showers. You can keep up to date with what's happening where you are on your BBC local radio station or, of course, on the travel pages of the BBC website. Now, as we go through the course of the morning, we still do have very windy conditions across parts of the Northern Isles. They'll slowly start to moderate. It doesn't mean that the wind will drop completely, and it is going to be a windy day wherever you are. And you can see this line of showers. When you see greens and yellows in the charts, that's indicating those showers are going to be heavy. We also are now in colder conditions. So we've got snow in the hills and mountains of Scotland lying at 400 metres, but even at lower levels, we'll see some of that wintry mix of sleet and of hail, for example. Northern Ireland, in the tops of the hills, around the tops of the hills of the Lake Districts and the Pennines, we could also see some snow. But this is this line of showers, squally showers, moving from the west towards the east, leading to tricky conditions. Ahead of it, though, it is a quieter start to the day, and it's not particularly cold. Now, as we head on through the rest of the day, there goes that line of showers. Will feel cold for most of us through the day, and we still will have the snow mostly on the tops of the hills and mountains of Scotland. We'll see a drier interlude. There will be some sunshine in between those showers, but the showers will pack a punch as well. Some of those will be heavy and thundery. These are our temperatures, 9 to about 12, but in the wind it will feel much colder than that. Not unusually low temperatures for this stage of the year. Neither is it unusual to have snow on the hills at this stage of November, but it's quite different to what we've been used to for the last couple of weeks. Now, as we head on into the weekend, well, this area here is the remnants of ex-Hurricane Kate, and it's coming our way. It's going to bring some windy conditions with it, as you can tell from looking at the isobars for some of us, and it's also going to bring some heavy rain. So if we take a look at what's happening on Saturday, we start off in a dry note, but then all this rain comes in from the west. And as we go through the weekend, areas that could see exceptional amounts of rain are areas such as northwest England and also North Wales. So Cumbria, Lancashire, across the Pennines, the Yorkshire end, for example, and North Wales. So do bear that in mind. The amount of rain that we're expecting could cause a lot of problems with surface water flooding. It could also cause some river flooding as well. So it's something we're keeping a very close eye on. But because it's the remnants of an ex-hurricane, we're importing some tropical air, so you'll notice that we are looking at the temperatures starting to rise, except in Scotland, where it still will be a bit on the nippy side. And that system will still very much be with us as we go through the course of Sunday. Still this rain, if anything, moving a little northwards, getting in across parts of Scotland as well. And you can see how, as it does so, the temperature goes up, and behind it will be some drizzle around, and we're looking at temperatures around about 14 or 15. So we're not done with this weather just yet, Charlie and Naga.
Carol, thank you very much. Come back to you a bit later on. Thank you.
So far this year, more than 500,000 migrants have crossed the Aegean Sea, heading from Turkey to the Greek islands. Hundreds of people have died along the way.
Yes, our correspondent Ed Thomas sent this report from the island of Lesbos, where thousands of Syrians, Afghans and Iraqis have arrived in recent months.
On dark nights, through rough seas. This is a journey like no other. And so many children now. This baby is soaked and freezing. His mother's only help is two sisters from West Yorkshire.
Who's got baby clothes?
Summer is a GP, but nothing prepared her for this.
What must they be running from to have to be forced to do this? Governments need to do so much more. They're a disgrace. The governments of the Europe are just disgusting, because this is what they're putting innocent families through. Okay, perfect.
But Europe's leaders are getting nervous. As night turns to day, the boats don't stop. Syrians, Iraqis, and more Afghans.
Right now in Afghanistan, there is no young power. All of the people of Afghanistan is going to come in Europe.
At sea, there's no stopping this flow. Smugglers are paid and migrant boats sail when and where they want, in full view of the Turkish Coast Guard. But don't think this is an easy journey. For some, there's no law on the Aegean. These people say they were held at gunpoint and robbed.
Almost died. Kill us.
And nobody knows exactly who's on these boats. This is Joe. You might recognise his accent or even his face. What was it like, the journey?
It was very scary, man. Believe me, man.
And this is a return trip to the place he calls home.
I was in Wembley for 2 years and 3 years in Kent. You know where is Kent?
Yes. You were in the UK?
Yeah, I was in the UK. I lived there for 5 years.
And then how did you get back to Afghanistan?
They sent me back.
So who stays, who goes? In Sweden and Germany, the mood music of this crisis is changing. But who'll tell Abu Suwaila to return to Syria, where Islamic State said they'd kill him for playing the music he loves? Or who'll force this Yazidi mother back to Sinjar, to a home that no longer exists? And who'll explain to 6-year-old Haneen and her sister Aya what all this is about? Ed Thomas, BBC News, Lesbos.
Let's see, time now is 6:24.
Now they're the historic buildings which have become the scene of period dramas and weekend trips, but there's a new warning that visiting stately homes could become a thing of the past.
The Historic Houses Association says they're just too big and expensive for anyone to run, and 70 of them could be closed to the public in the next 5 years. Our reporter Lucy Burton is at Arley Hall in Cheshire for us this morning. Lucy, it's not been easy for the owners there, has it?
Well, good morning. I'm in the library in Arley Hall. Now, it's a house that's been in the same family for the last 550 years. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to imagine past generations sitting at the desk, writing their letters and managing the estate. But like a lot of these old houses, it's had its fair share of problems. In the 1960s, the family had to move out because it simply fell into disrepair. And then a few years later, the dreaded dry rot was found, and they had to really rethink the whole way they were going to do it. And that's a big problem for houses up and down the country. Now, Arley Hall has managed to rise from the ashes, mainly because the family thought of lots of different ways of diversifying. Now, one of the things they've done is open the house and gardens up to visitors. And they've also, if you come with me, I can just show you, opened the drawing room up to weddings, and that's a huge part of their revenue stream, and one of the ways they've managed to diversify and keep the house in the public sphere and to help the local economy as well.
Thank you very much, and we'll be back to see more around the house a little later on. It looks magnificent, doesn't it?
It does look stunning. Getting in the mood for children in need. Of course, we heard the news that Terry Wogan's not very well. He's got back problems. He won't be there, but so much is still going on. And we've been getting ready for this year's Children in Need. Getting into character for the theme of childhood heroes. That's the theme. There are all of us. Charlie, obviously. Norman Wisdom, your childhood hero?
Norman Wisdom, absolutely.
You base your humour on him?
Yeah, and we have Prince, of course, next door to me, looking down the line.
Bill is the Lone Ranger.
And Wonder Woman, of course, on the far side. What an extraordinary image that is. The idea is childhood heroes, isn't it? That's the theme of this year's Children in Need. So if you've got any pictures yourselves, if you're dressing up this morning, do send in some pictures for us.
Talking of childhood heroes, that's fun, but we're also tackling fears. Well, Scott Mills is the Radio 1 DJ, and we're going to find out at 8:15 how he's going to face his fears and use that to raise money for children in need as well.
Time now to get the news, travel and weather where you are.
See you soon.
Good morning from BBC London News. I'm Alex Bushell. A boy has been remanded in custody following a stabbing at a school. It happened in the lobby of Southfields Academy in Wandsworth on Tuesday afternoon. A 16-year-old has been charged with grievous bodily harm. The 15-year-old pupil is expected to make a full recovery. The consumer group Which has called for a crackdown on ticket resale websites, claiming customers face a stitch-up. It says it found examples of tickets being put on sale before the official release date and restrictions on their resale then being ignored. The industry says it has high levels of consumer protection and is committed to transparency. Banking, medicine, teaching and law are the most popular career aspirations for teenagers in the capital. That's according to the company behind the country's biggest jobs and careers fair. Skills London is free to attend and is taking place today at the Excel Centre. Organisers say around 45,000 jobs and apprenticeships will be on offer. And now it's that time of year again. Children in Need takes place tonight. Thousands of Londoners have been raising money for this year's appeal, with all the proceeds going towards helping children across the capital. Later on, BBC London will be live at Tower Bridge and speaking to some of the charities and fundraisers involved. OK, well, let's have a look at the travel situation then this morning. First, a look at the Tube and the travel board. You can see that there is currently, yes, a good service on all lines. Moving elsewhere and onto the roads, this is the view of the Blackwall Tunnel. It is queuing northbound back past Woolwich Road due to a breakdown halfway through the tunnel, as you can see on the left of the screen. The M4 eastbound is slow from junction 4 for Heathrow to junction 2 for Brentford. Moorgate, the traffic lights aren't working at Ropemaker Street. And in Stockwell, there are roadworks on the A203 Stockwell Road. That's between the station there and Clapham Road. Finally, Camberwell New Road, roadworks there as well, closing a lane by Camberwell Station Road. So do avoid the area if you can. OK, well, let's have a check on the weather now then with Elizabeth Rizzini.
Hello, good morning. It's been very mild so far this week, but today is going to feel an awful lot colder. A very blustery day, feeling an awful lot more like November, and there will be some rather strong gusts of wind as well as some showers at times. But it's a dry, bright early start, some sunshine around. Then we get this line of very squally showers come through the late morning. A drier afternoon. There will be the odd isolated shower here and there. Top temperatures today much lower than they have been, between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. So feeling a lot cooler too through the course of the night. In fact, a distinctly chilly start to the day tomorrow. We'll see a few showers around at times, temperatures down to perhaps as low as 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, even in some of the towns. So for tomorrow then, we've got some milder air coming through eventually. That's going to come through on this weather front here that will give us some outbreaks of rain on and off through the course of the day. Some rather blustery westerly winds still, but generally the temperatures picking up as we head through the weekend. Sunday is going to be a slightly drier day. There'll still be some grey skies around and some outbreaks of drizzle at times. A rather strong, brisk westerly wind, and this is the picture as we head into the rest of next week as well. So temperatures coming up from tomorrow.
Well, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in half an hour. Much more, though, on our website at the usual address. Now, though, back to Charlie and Naga.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
It's 6:30. We're going to bring you all the latest news and sport in a moment, but also on Breakfast this morning. 11-time champion jockey Pat Eddery died on Tuesday. His daughter Natasha is going to be here. She's going to talk to us about his struggle with alcohol.
We'll find out why the skyline of Durham is being turned into an illuminated work of art as part of a 4-day festival of light.
From reality TV star to TV presenter, we're going to talk to Mark Wright about why he's helping children to create the dens of their dreams.
All that's still to come a little later on time. Now, exactly 6:30, our main news stories this morning. The Pentagon has announced that US forces have carried out an airstrike targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
It happened near the Syrian city of Raqqa and was aimed at a vehicle. Well, a worldwide hunt was launched for Mohammed Emwazi after he was seen in videos of the beheadings of Western hostages.
Our North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue is in Washington for us this morning. Gary, the news of this strike came in the early hours of this morning. Bring us right up to date.
Charlie, what we know is that it took place sometime on Thursday, so sometime yesterday, that it was done by a drone, one of these sort of unmanned aircraft, and it had one of these Hellfire missiles on it. And what they did, they said, is they'd been tracking him for some time, and he was in a vehicle, and they took out this vehicle. And as Naga was saying, it was in Raqqa, which is the sort of headquarters of Islamic State in Syria. Now, they've stopped short of saying they definitely killed him because they never really quite know. And they go through a process now of trying to verify whether or not they got their man or not. And how the way they do that, quite brutally, because there's not a lot left when these missiles hit, what they do is they listen to phone calls, they watch text messages, they have some human sources on the ground, human intelligence sources, who they ask about these things. And frankly, they see if this person pops up anywhere else. So that will be the process from now on. But Jihadi John, as we know, was infamous for those videos. He's regarded as what they call a high-value individual, and if they can prove they've got him, this will be a major win, if you like, for the coalition.
And Gary, for the moment, thank you.
The BBC has learned that ministers are considering whether homeopathy should be added to a blacklist of treatments that doctors in England are banned from prescribing. Homeopathy is based on the idea that diluting substances which can cause illnesses can then be used to help people to heal. One example is using pollen to help cure hay fever.
The couple who killed Becky Watts will be sentenced today at Bristol Crown Court. Early this week, a jury took less than 4 hours to find 28-year-old Nathan Matthews guilty of his stepsister's murder and 21-year-old Shauna Hall guilty of manslaughter. The teenager was strangled to death in February. Her body was found with more than 40 injuries.
Police officers in England and Wales could need a degree-level education under plans being put forward by the College of Policing. The organisation says the job is as difficult as professions which only accept graduates, but at the moment only a minority of successful candidates have degrees. The Police Federation says the plan would exclude hard-to-reach groups and those who can't afford to pay for a university course.
Storm Abigail has swept across parts of the UK, bringing with it winds of up to 85 miles an hour. It's the first time a storm in the UK has been given a name. In preparation, every school in the Western Isles and Shetland are closed to pupils today. Nearly 60 primary and secondary schools are affected.
5 days after a historic vote in Myanmar, the party of former Burmese political prisoner Aung San Suu Kyi has now won enough seats to choose the country's next president. It was the first contested vote in 25 years. The new parliament, though, will not convene until late January, when a new president will be chosen.
A pledge to halve the number of stillbirths in England by 2030 will be announced by the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt today. In 2013, the UK had one of the highest rates of stillbirths in Europe. The government has said they'll pledge over £4 million to ensure best practice across the NHS.
Ministers investigating the failed charity Kids Company says that it's staggering that the government gave it more than £40 million of public money over 13 years. The report from the Public Accounts Committee has been published as further claims have emerged from a former worker at the charity about inappropriate spending.
The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will speak to some 60,000 people at an event at Wembley Stadium on the second day of his visit to the UK. Britain and India have signed trade deals worth at least £9 billion. However, Mr Modi's visit to the UK has not been welcomed by some human rights activists.
Sir Terry Wogan has been forced to pull out of presenting this year's Children in Need because of back problems. He's hosted every live show since the event began in 1980. He said in a statement, "I'm going to miss our wonderful, inspiring evening together, but I'll be with you, watching, cheering and donating to a magnificent cause." We wish him well.
We'll have a look at the weather. Of course, a lot of people affected by the storms yesterday. Carol will be telling us about how it will be affecting a lot of parts of the UK later on. Right now, Mike's here with the sport.
Morning.
Yes, good morning. On the latest on who's going to take over the England Rugby Union head coach job, and Jake White seems to be in the running now. I don't know if he's holding up his phone number there or maybe his blueprint for perhaps winning England the Rugby World Cup. That's what he's promising to do already. Jake White has told the BBC he would take the job of England head coach if he was offered it, but he won't actually be applying. The South African won the World Cup as coach of the Springboks in 2007, but he has been turned down for the England post twice in the past. He has stated that he could win the World Cup for England if he's chosen to replace Stuart Lancaster. White is for the moment in charge at Montpellier in France.
Yes, in terms of that, if they had asked me and if they're genuinely interested and they thought I was the right guy, it would be an honour to be involved with a side like England. But, it's a long shot off. No one's come to ask me anything, so at this point in time, it's all just media hype. I've gone public many times to say this is a sleeping giant. It's one of the top sporting jobs in the world.
White's team Montpellier were well beaten by Harlequins at the Stoop last night in the European Challenge Cup. England captain Chris Robshaw scored the final try for Quins in their 41-18 victory. Now, the unbeaten run of England's footballers will be severely tested tonight by the European champions Spain in a friendly on the Costa Blanca as preparations begin in earnest for next summer's European Championships in France. England haven't lost a match since their awful World Cup in Brazil, and while captain Wayne Rooney is in Alicante with the squad, he won't feature in tonight's game, and Leicester's Jamie Vardy is also a doubt.
I think there's lots of players who, in the space of the last 2 or 3 months since the start of the season, have really shown themselves to be very, very serious competitors for a place in the starting lineup. So these 2 games give us the ideal opportunity, because anyone who gets his chance against either Spain or France and then goes onto the field and takes that chance and comes off the field having played well is obviously going to be that one step further forward, if you like, for being considered next summer.
Wales face the Netherlands tonight, and how quickly the football tables have turned. The Dutch World Cup semi-finalists just last year, haven't qualified for Euro 2016, but Wales, of course, have. Nevertheless, the Wales manager Chris Coleman is wary of the threat they will pose.
We're up against good opposition. The fact they never qualified, they're almost rebuilding, but nevertheless, they're going to be a wounded animal and a dangerous one at that, so we know it'll be tough, but it's a game we're going into expecting to perform like we've always done, and that's do our best and try and get a result.
Like Wales, Northern Ireland are heading to their first European Championship finals next summer. Their warm-up begins tonight as well with a visit of Latvia to Belfast.
It's important for us to win and continue with the run of form that we're in. Winning breeds confidence, it breeds belief, and this team has come a long way in the last 15-18 months, and we want to continue with that. We want to go into France. This is the first step in terms of the preparation for France, so we want to continue with that.
Now in tennis, Andy Murray has avoided Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer in the draw for the ATP Tour Finals taking place in London. The world number 2 will face Rafa Nadal, though, with Stan Wawrinka and David Ferrer also making up the last 4, or the 4 in that side of the draw at least. Last year, Murray didn't make it out, though, of his group, losing to Federer and Kei Nishikori. Now, he's only 15, but the Chinese schoolboy Yang Bingtao has caused a huge shock in Coventry at snooker's Champion of Champions. He's knocked out Sean Murphy, the current world number 4. Murphy was the world champion in 2005 when Bingtao was just 5 years old. Yan was later beaten by Australian Neil Robertson, who won 6-3 to set up a semi-final against Joe Perry. And it is now back to school in China to complete his studies, but at least he'll have something to tell his teachers about if they do show and tell or whatever it is in China. And when he returns to the sport next summer in 2016, he will be the first professional to have been born in the 21st century. If that doesn't make you feel old, nothing will. Now, Russia faces being banned from international athletics when the sport's governing body meets later to discuss widespread doping and corruption. It follows a damning report by the World Anti-Doping Agency, as we heard earlier this week. Russia are expected to admit some of the charges in order to avoid a complete ban from the sport. Our sports news correspondent Richard Conway now reports.
Just 10 weeks into the job, and IAAF President Lord Coe is fighting to save the integrity of athletics and his own credibility. Later today, the world governing body will decide on a punishment for the Russian Athletics Federation after investigators uncovered widespread systemic doping. Cheating implicated the IAAF too, and took place while Lord Coe was a vice president of the organisation. Now, Britain's captain at this summer's World Championships is questioning whether he's the right person to rebuild the sport's reputation.
He was a bit naive in his comments post the report. Someone who's been in the organisation since 2007, I think it is. It's very hard to pretend that he didn't know what was going on. I've always believed he's delivered a home Olympics for us, and he's an incredible person on and off the track. So I want to believe he's the right person to do the job.
The IAAF is in a precarious position. Russia's President Vladimir Putin believes clean athletes should not be punished over the actions of those who cheated. But the IAAF wants to send a strong message and is under pressure to suspend Russian athletes from competing. If that happens, Russia's reaction as a political and sporting superpower is likely to be swift. It will want, at the very least, to be back in time for the Rio Olympic Games next summer. A backlash of some description now seems inevitable, whatever course of action Lord Coe and his colleagues decide to take today. Richard Conway, BBC News.
Yeah, so a huge day for athletics, of course. More on that as it breaks later on today.
Very good, Mike. Thank you. See you later on.
Time now is 6:42. US officials say they've carried out an airstrike targeting the Islamic State militant Jihadi John.
Yes, those details on that strike coming in the early hours of this morning, and we'll have more on that as it emerges. No confirmation yet that the strike was successful. But elsewhere, of course, there have been other military action in place, action against Kurdish forces backed by British and US air power, claimed to have taken control of a main highway. This is in northern Iraq that has been a vital supply for IS militants.
It's the strategic town of Sinjar, which was taken by IS forces last year. Now, our correspondent Jim Muir is on the front line and been following events. He sent this report.
The offensive began at first light. Kurdish forces on the mountain overlooking Sinjar opened up with sustained rocket barrages onto IS positions below. Jets from the American-led coalition struck the militants in and around the town, causing fires which burnt through the day. On the battlefront immediately around Sinjar town, Kurdish fighters were exchanging fire with IS militants barely a stone's throw away. The town's population was mainly from the Yazidi minority. They all fled the IS advance last year. The men who were caught were killed, the women taken into slavery.
Well, this frontline position right on the very edge of Sinjar is about as close as it's safe to get at the moment. The Peshmerga are pushing in from two different angles, and there are more massing here waiting to attack. And among the Kurdish forces here, there are also some people from Sinjar who are waiting eagerly and anticipating the moment when they can go back to their homes.
The Kurds are moving in around Sinjar from east and west, cutting it off. But the street battle with the militants may be long and dangerous. There were 10 suicide car bombs today alone. Jim Muir, BBC News, Sinjar.
As I said, Jim Muir is on the front line. He's in Sinjar at the moment, and we can talk to him now. And Jim, this stalemate in the area has been quite prolonged. The Kurds clearly determined to win Sinjar back. Just how likely is that morning?
I think it is pretty much almost certain to happen, but obviously we can't totally prejudge it. But the Kurds have massed a huge force. They say 7,500 initially. There may be more than that. Plus they have the full support of the coalition airstrikes, which have been really heavy on the first day of combat there, and so that there is a determination that this will be taken back. It may take time to take the town itself, but as I was saying in the report there, they are pressing in on the main road from the east and the west. They've cut that road, which means that the IS militants in the town are cut off from supplies. Their presence there militarily is not tenable. The question is, will they make a real stand? Certainly what they will do is put bombs and booby traps and so on, which will make an advance slow. But I think it is pretty much inevitable because there is a determination there, and they really can't back off at this stage and let it just fizzle out.
Jim, we've got to talk to you also about Jihadi John. This news coming through in the last few hours, a strike targeting Jihadi John. No confirmation yet that he has been killed, but still this is significant development in the fight.
Absolutely. It shows that the Americans, at least once they've got their sights on somebody, they just don't lose that sight, and they've followed him. Despite all the intervening, upheavals and news and all the rest of it, they've been quietly tracking him as best they could. And now they say that a drone strike on Raqqa, the headquarters of IS, they believe, or hope at least, has taken him out. Now, they haven't confirmed it, but the fact that they've announced it, I would say, makes it pretty likely, because I think if they'd hit and missed or they just had no idea, I think they'd probably keep quiet about it. But they have not got, as it were, absolute proof that they got him. But I think the fact that they've announced it makes it seem pretty likely.
Indeed. OK, Jim, thanks very much. Jim Muir there in Sinjar talking to us.
Let's see, time now, 6:46. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News, and that is our main story this morning. US forces have carried out an airstrike in Syria targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
Storm Abigail sweeps across parts of the UK. It's brought with it winds of up to 90 miles an hour. So we're talking about Storm Abigail. There's also Storm Kate. Carol's got all the latest on this. Morning, Carol.
Good morning, both. Good morning to you. Well, I'm glad to say Abigail through today is going to continue to journey northeastwards, but it still is very windy, as you can see from the isobars. We've also got this little front which is going to sweep from the west to the east of the country. It is going to bring squally winds, meaning there'll be sudden gusts of wind, and also it's going to be accompanied by some heavy rain as well. So a lot going on with the weather today. If you are out and about, do take extra care. We've got the combination of the squally winds, thundery showers, and you can hear what's happening where you are on your BBC local radio station or the travel pages of the BBC weather website, and also the travel pages too, of course. Now here we've got this band of squally rain, thundery rain moving slowly eastwards across Scotland and Northern Ireland. We still have the showers, but the wind is still very much a feature. Only slowly will it abate, but it's not going to drop completely by any stretch. It's much colder today as well, so we've got snow lying at 400 metres across the hills and mountains of Scotland. At lower levels, we'll still see some winteriness, but that will be hill, and it will also be some sleet. We'll also see some of that across the tops of the Pennines and the hills of the Lake District. But as we come south, we've got this line of showers. It is heavy and it is moving eastwards, and it is also accompanied by gusty winds, hence the squally conditions. It will continue to move eastwards through the course of the day. Behind it, there will be some dry weather, there'll be some sunshine, but there will still be a good packet of showers. And again, still windy, even though the winds are starting to come down. They'll come down last across the Northern Isles. Now, it's going to feel cold today. We've got temperatures roughly up to about 12, but in the wind, it will feel much colder than we've been used to. Not unusual for November, neither is the snow in the hills, but it's a real change compared to what we've been used to. Then as we head on into the weekend, our next deep area of low pressure is coming our way. This is what I was alluding to. It will have a tropical mix of air mixed in amongst it. And as you can see from the isobars, it's also going to be windy, but it's going to be wet. And this time it's the rain that is causing us concern. A lot of rain coming our way, both on Saturday, and if I quickly flick to Sunday, you'll see also on Sunday. Now, this could lead to some problems with flooding, river flooding, surface water flooding, especially across northern England and also North Wales. So do keep tuned to the weather forecast. A lot going on, Charlie Naga.
Will do, Carol. Thanks very much.
Let's see, time is 6:49. Let's go to Ben now. He's going to talk to us about tax offices. A bit of shake-up going on.
Yeah, announced yesterday, and now we're discussing the repercussions of that for people, especially that need to get their tax returns in. Yes, good morning. Big changes coming to the HMRC. That's the body that is, of course, responsible for collecting our taxes. Now, HMRC has nearly 60,000 employees in 170 offices right around the country. But, as I said yesterday, it announced plans to close nearly 140 of them. Instead, it will open 13 regional centres. Now, it says that is part of a modernisation plan because more and more of us are now doing our tax returns online. But critics say it could cause chaos, not least because a committee of MPs just last week said its record of answering calls was already staggeringly bad. Well, Emma Suchland is a tax partner at the accountants at BDO. Emma, good morning.
Good morning.
What do we know about what the HMRC has said about why they need to close these offices?
So the closure of these offices is part of an ongoing programme that HMRC have been doing roughly for the last 5 years that sees the modernisation. A number of these offices have been around since the 60s and 70s, and very much the transformation of HMRC in the digital age, which I think all of us acknowledge we need to have to match the businesses and taxpayers out there.
But can 140 local offices that are being replaced actually be replaced by 13 regional ones? Can they do the same work?
Very much HMRC are saying that those 13 core offices will be significantly larger offices, and they'll very much be placing a greater reliance on the digital platform that they're building alongside that to be able to do a lot of that, so that the inspectors and the people in those 13 offices have more time to spend with HMRC's customers.
All well and good if you're tech savvy, you have access to the internet, you can get online to do your tax returns. The problem, of course, is for people who can't. If they rely on being able to call or go to their local office to get help, where do you go?
And that's going to be the challenge. That's already the challenge now, we know from the customer service records. HMRC are saying that for those people who aren't yet in the digital age, that they will have offices for people to go, and they will have people they will be able to send out to help those people. I think perhaps they've not appreciated how much of the population that might well cover.
Yeah, it's interesting because already this morning, I just put this online on social media, Lisa getting in touch says it doesn't matter how many staff or how much money they have to spend, HMRC is a mess. Ian here saying how to take an already shocking service back into the dark ages. It is utter madness. And this all related to that criticism that we heard from the committee last week, that it's really difficult to get through on the phone. It's really hard to get advice in the first place. So these cuts coming on top of that surely will just make it even worse, will they not?
And I think there is the real risk that in the short term there were. So the closure of these offices and the transformation is going to take place in a rolling programme over the next 10 years. And I do think in that time frame, a lot of the senior time of HMRC will be taken up with that process, and a lot of the staff, obviously, there will be the disruption to that. And I think there is the real risk, and we'd encourage HMRC to engage with businesses and taxpayers and individuals on how they can continue to look to improve the service and not let it regress while this huge transformation takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. One we'll watch very closely. Emma, thanks very much. Emma Suchland there from BDO. More from me after 7. I'll see you soon.
See you then, Ben. Thanks.
6:53 the time. Folklore, flying fish and fog, all transforming the city of Durham this weekend at the 4th Lumiere Festival.
The event showcases light installations from artists all over the world. This year, organisers are expecting record visitors.
And for the first time, the event is also going to travel to London. Fiona Trott reports.
What you can see now is the Lambton Worm, which is obviously a very famous local tale from the northeast, where it terrorised the local villagers. So we wanted to kind of put that into the piece as to be a bit terrifying for the children, we say.
That's a bit mean.
Well, yes, but give them a bit of fright at night time.
On the river, a friendlier sight. These whale watchers weren't put off by the weather.
Absolutely amazing. It's unbelievable, isn't it, that it's all done with light, and you just can't believe that you're not watching a whale coming out of the water.
The sounds that you heard as the tail splashed into the water, it was just amazing, really. You could actually believe it was real.
The whole thing was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It was the way when it leapt out of the water, fantastic.
Something this spectacular does come at a price, but this man says it's worth every penny.
The times are hard. Durham County Council is having to save about 20 million a year, like a lot of councils at the moment. But for the $500,000 that we put in, about 4 million plus comes back into the local economy. And so we feel that that more than repays the outlay that the council makes. And we should add that private sector business and the Arts Council match our contribution as well. So it really is a team effort to put this on.
The idea behind this installation is that you control what it does. You use your mobile device to change the colour, and when you tap on the screen, it shows your fingerprint. They come here because Lumiere enhances the landmarks they love. The festival will go to London in January. Fiona Trott, BBC News, Durham.
Some amazing installations there. Still to come in the next half hour on Breakfast. We're going to find out why there are fears that some of Britain's grandest buildings could soon be closed to the public.
The time now to get the news, travel and weather where you are.
Good morning from BBC London News. I'm Alex Bushell. A boy has been remanded in custody following a stabbing at a school in southwest London. It happened in the lobby of Southfields Academy in Wandsworth on Tuesday afternoon. A 16-year-old has been charged with grievous bodily harm. The 15-year-old pupil is expected, though, to make a full recovery. The consumer group Which has called for a crackdown on ticket resale websites, claiming customers face a stitch-up. It said it found examples of tickets being put on sale before the official release date and restrictions on their resale being ignored. The industry says it has high levels of consumer protection and is committed to transparency. Banking, medicine, teaching and law are the most popular career aspirations for teenagers in the capital. That's according to the company behind the country's biggest jobs and careers fair. Skills London is free to attend and is taking place today at the Excel Centre. Organisers say around 45,000 jobs and apprenticeships will be on offer. Now, it is that time of year again. Children in Need takes place tonight. Thousands of Londoners have been raising money for this year's appeal, with proceeds going towards helping children across the capital. Later on BBC London, we'll be live at Tower Bridge and speaking to some of the charities and fundraisers involved. OK, well, let's have a quick look at the travel situation then this morning on the Tube. As you can see from our travel board, there is a good service on all lines. Looking elsewhere and on the roads, the A406 North Circular is congested from Staples Corner towards the works at Neasden, as you can see there on the right of the screen. Blackwall Tunnel is queuing northbound as well. That's back past the Sun and the Sands after a breakdown halfway through the tunnel. In Moorgate, the traffic lights aren't working at Ropemaker Street. In Stockwell, there are roadworks on the A203 Stockwell Road between the Stockwell Station and Clapham Road. And finally, Camberwell roadworks there as well. That's closing a lane by Camberwell Station Road. OK, well, let's have a quick check on the weather now with Elizabeth Rizzini.
Hello, good morning. It's been very mild so far this week, but today is going to feel an awful lot colder. A very blustery day, feeling an awful lot more like November, and there will be some rather strong gusts of wind as well as some showers at times. But it's a dry, bright early start, some sunshine around. Then we get this line of very squally showers come through the late morning. A drier afternoon. There will be the odd isolated shower here and there. Top temperatures today much lower than they have been, between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. So feeling a lot cooler too through the course of the night. In fact, a distinctly chilly start to the day tomorrow. We'll see a few showers around at times, temperatures down to perhaps as low as 6 or 7 degrees Celsius even in some of the towns. So for tomorrow then, we've got some milder air coming through eventually. That's going to come through on this weather front here that will give us some outbreaks of rain on and off through the course of the day. Some rather blustery westerly winds still, but generally the temperatures picking up as we head through the weekend. Sunday is going to be a slightly drier day. There'll still be some grey skies around and some outbreaks of drizzle at times. A rather strong, brisk westerly wind, and this is the picture as we head into the rest of next week as well. So temperatures coming up from tomorrow.
Well, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in around half an hour. Much more, though, and all of our stories on our website at the usual address. Bye for now.
He's in an exotic land, in the far reaches of Northern Europe, a place of unbelievable history, myth and legend.
I'm in Ireland.
Join Simon Reeve as he discovers a different kind of island in a two-part series.
Why barefoot? This is the proper way to do it.
We just want to live in the present and look towards the future.
An island that I really didn't know.
Island with Simon Reeve starts Sunday the 22nd of November on BBC Two.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
US forces carry out a drone strike targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
The attack on a vehicle believed to be carrying Mohammed Amwazi took place near the Syrian city of Raqqa. The Pentagon says it's not yet clear if he's been killed.
Good morning, it's Friday the 13th of November.
Also coming up this morning, an end to homeopathy on the NHS. Ministers consider banning doctors in England from prescribing it to patients.
Every new police officer in England and Wales will need to have a degree under plans being put forward by the College of Policing.
Good morning. Are you stressed by the vast number of emails you receive every day? Well, one Italian company has banned emails for a week to cut staff stress. So is it time we followed their example?
One in the sport, a World Cup winner enters the running for the England rugby job. The South African Jake White, who led his home nation to World Cup glory in 2007, says he would take the job if offered it.
I'm in Ullapool, one of the communities which was in the path of Storm Abigail. The Scottish Islands, the worst hit though. 1,000 homes in Lewis still without power, and all schools in the Hebrides shut for the day, as well as in Shetland.
And Storm Abigail is now abating. It's reached its peak. The winds will slowly ease, but it will be a very slow process. For all of us today, it is going to be a windy day. There'll be some showers around. Some of those will be particularly heavy and thundery, and it's going to feel much colder than it has done. I'll have more in 15 minutes.
Carol, thank you.
To bring you up to date with our main story, in the past few hours, the Pentagon has announced that the US forces have carried out an airstrike targeting British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
It happened near the Syrian city of Raqqa and was aimed at a vehicle. A worldwide hunt was launched for Mohammed Emwazi after he was seen in videos of the beheadings of Western hostages. Our North America correspondent Laura Bicker reports.
Jihadi John became the masked, militant face of the Islamic State. He appeared in sinister videos threatening Western hostages. The Pentagon says they launched a direct drone strike on his vehicle, one of many they carry out each week as part of an operation to combat ISIS. They tracked him to near the city of Raqqa in Syria. It's thought they've had him in their sights for some time. Jihadi John was once known as Mohammed Emwazi. He was born in Kuwait but came to London at the age of 6. He studied at the University of Westminster and was described as quiet and dedicated to his religion. He went to Syria 2 years ago. He was linked to the murders of the American journalist James Foley and British aid workers Alan Hennings and David Haines. Brutal killings which America vowed never to forget.
Those who make the mistake of harming Americans will learn that we will not forget, and that our reach is long, and that justice will be served.
But it's not yet known if this strike was successful. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Washington.
Our North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue is in Washington. Gary, as Laura said in that report, still not known yet if it was a successful strike, but the news is out there and it's a significant development if it is true.
Yeah, what tends to happen with these strikes when they hit what they call HVIs, these high-value individuals, if they're doing it from a drone, they use a Hellfire missile, that makes a hell of a mess, frankly, of the target. So they don't really get any confirmation until much later that they've actually struck the person they've struck, and they do that by tracking phone calls, text messages, gathering information from human intelligence sources on the ground. So that's what they're trying to do now. They believe they were tracking the right man for a period of time. They believe he was in the vehicle, and they say they hit that vehicle. As you say, will be a significant moment if it's true, not particularly because Emwazi was seen as particularly senior in the organisation militarily, but because of those videos, those great sort of recruiting sergeants for militants, those videos, he was seen as representing the sort of propaganda war, the successful propaganda war that Islamic State has been fighting. And so to get him will be very much something that will be cheered here in Washington and London.
Gary, thanks very much for keeping us up to date. Gary O'Donoghue there for us in Washington.
The BBC has learned the ministers are considering whether homeopathy should be added to blacklists of treatments that doctors in England are banned from prescribing.
Homeopathy is based on the idea that diluting substances which cause illnesses can help people to heal. So an example is using pollen to help cure hay fever. Lisa Hampley has more.
The NHS spends around £4 million a year on homeopathy, despite saying there's no good quality proof that it works. A charity which describes itself as promoting evidence-based science has challenged that discrepancy, threatening to take the NHS to court if it continues to fund the treatment.
Doctors really should be prescribing medicines that are known to work. Now, homeopathy is a great example of a medicine that is not known to work. In fact, it is known not to work, and yet the National Health Service spends millions of pounds on it.
But supporters of the treatment dispute that.
We know from the science that actually when GPs incorporate homeopathic medicine, they get better results. Either they get the same results with less drugs, or the patients just get better quicker.
Drugs can be blacklisted for a range of reasons, among them the presence of cheaper alternatives, or because they're not considered to be effective. It wouldn't affect people buying them over the counter or privately. The Minister for Life Sciences, George Freeman, told the BBC, "We have a duty to make sure we spend NHS funds on the most effective treatments, and that we expect to consult on proposals in due course." The BBC understands that consultation will start next year. Lisa Hamper, BBC News.
The couple convicted of killing Becky Watts will be sentenced today at Bristol Crown Court. Earlier this week, a jury took less than 4 hours to find 28-year-old Nathan Matthews guilty of his stepsister's murder and 21-year-old Shauna Hall guilty of manslaughter. The teenager was strangled to death in February. Her body was found with more than 40 injuries.
Police officers in England and Wales could need a degree-level education under plans being put forward by the College of Policing.
The organisation says the job is as difficult as professions which only accept graduates, but at the moment only a minority of successful candidates have degrees. Nick Qureshi reports.
This would represent the biggest shake-up in policing for years. There are currently no formal educational requirements for entering the service. Some forces require applicants to have A-levels or a certificate in policing. Others demand experience in a policing role. Under today's proposals, applicants would need to complete a degree in practical policing or a conversion course. The College of Policing says being a police officer is a job of degree-level complexity, as difficult as professions such as social work and nursing, which only accept graduates. The Police Federation, which represents most officers, says it fundamentally disagrees with the plan. It says it would exclude hard-to-reach groups and those who can't afford to pay for a university course. If the college gets its way, a pilot scheme could run from 2017, with a rollout across every force in England and Wales 2 years later. Nick Qureshi, BBC News.
The first storm to be named in the UK has been causing disruption to parts of the UK overnight.
Yes, Abigail has seen gusts of more than 80 miles an hour in the Orkney and Western Isles, and hundreds left without power overnight. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon is in the Highland for us this morning. And Lorna, we can see through the moisture on the lens there. Conditions quite bad. What's it been like?
Yeah, still pretty squally here in Ullapool, hailstones and sweeping through every 10 minutes or so, but it was a big hoolie in the middle of the night when the main power of the storm hit. People here, some of them even got phone calls warning them that their power might go out. In the end, here at least, it didn't happen, but there were power outages in the Western Isles. 1,000 homes in Lewis left without power. They really felt the main force of the storm. They were warned at its height to only travel if really necessary. Of course, the main dangers being on the low-lying roads. There's all schools in the Western Isles also closed today, as are all schools in Shetland, but the main body of the storm has now moved northwards towards Shetland. I think they're feeling the full brunt of it just now. Still pretty unpleasant weather here though, and all ferries to the Western Isles remain in port, namely the ferries to Stornoway that usually run from here in Ullapool.
Lorna, for the moment, thank you.
5 days after a historic vote in Myanmar, the party of former Burmese political prisoner Aung San Suu Kyi has now won enough seats to choose the country's next president. It was the first contested vote in 25 years. The new parliament will not convene until late January, when a new president will be chosen.
A pledge to halve the number of stillbirths in England by 2030 will be announced by the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt today. In 2013, the UK had one of the highest rates of stillbirths in Europe. The government has said they'll pledge over £4 million to ensure best practice across the NHS.
Ministers investigating the failed charity Kids Company says it's staggering that the government gave it more than £40 million of public money over 13 years. The report from the Public Accounts Committee has been published as further claims have emerged of a former worker at the charity about inappropriate spending.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will speak to some 60,000 people at an event at Wembley Stadium on the second day of his visit to the UK. Britain and India have signed trade deals worth at least £9 billion. However, Mr Modi's visit to the UK has not been welcomed by some human rights activists.
Sir Terry Wogan has been forced to pull out of presenting this year's Children in Need because of back problems. Now, he has hosted every live show since the event began in 1980. He said in a statement, "I'm going to miss our wonderful, inspiring evening with you, watching, cheering and donating to a magnificent cause. We wish him well."
Yes, we wish him well, and we'll be talking more about Children in Need and the various things that are being done. Possibly you're doing things at home, dressing up, and we'll talk more about that a little later on this morning. Time now is 11 minutes past 7.
In the early hours of this morning, the US has carried out an airstrike targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
David Lowe is a former counter-terrorism officer and joins us now. Very good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning. So the details, as it stands at the moment, we know that this targeted attack. We know it was on a convoy, on a specific vehicle, Jihadi John being the target. What does this tell you about the operation?
Well, they'll have been monitoring him for some months, and of course the advantage, of course, with the US being there, and it's not a UK strike, is because it's Syria, because that's the location, and Raqqa is the stronghold there of Islamic State in that particular region. So they will have been monitoring for a number of months, and there'll be individuals who have been targeted. I mean, we saw here in the UK in August when David Cameron authorised the strike against the 2 UK citizens. I think that's been a one-off for us here in the UK, but there'll be other individuals. So they'll monitor this for some time. This just won't have been overnight. The key part now is trying to establish if they have actually got to Benghazi.
So if they have, we were talking to our correspondent Gary O'Donoghue in Washington earlier. He said the significance of this isn't because he was particularly high up in the military rankings of IS, it's the fact that he was in these videos, the beheading videos of British and American workers, military and aid workers, and what he meant for the image of IS.
Yeah, I think he's been a very powerful image. I mean, on top of that, there was the video of the 20 Syrian soldiers, where he took the leading part. There was the Japanese hostage. So it's affected quite a few states around the world, and he has been that image. That's been a very powerful image as a recruiting tool for other young people to go to that region.
How much of an impact does it make, though, when it comes particularly to recruitment of IS, when we've spoken so much on this programme about the spread, the reach that IS has over the internet?
It's absolutely phenomenal what they do. And key to them is decentralising their communication system, certainly like social media and so on. So it's not just one language, they're talking in a number of languages around the world. They're attracting people from Russia. I've been doing some work with a colleague there, and they have a similar problem. Families going over, individuals going over from the Caucasus states to go and join Islamic State. We've seen it in Europe. There's over 1,500 estimated from France, the US, Canada, Australia. We have the individual and the impact that has in home states. We saw it with the youngest terrorist we got convicted from Blackburn, who was communicating in Australia. This is the impact the likes of Benghazi and his colleagues in Islamic State have. And they're very, very effective in doing this.
We saw in the report earlier on the clip of Barack Obama. This is a few months ago, saying America will not forget the individuals, and America's reach is long. And the operation that goes on behind the scenes to track individuals, that is a very important part of what they're doing.
Oh, it is. And, you know, if you like, he has been in effect out of reach because of the location he's at. It's very difficult for us to have any forces on the ground to get there. But over time, it won't be just camera surveillance. There will have been informants there, individuals who will be passing information on. That'll be crucial now in the aftermath of this attack.
Who wins, or who gets the upper hand if Jihadi John has been killed? I mean, is it a propaganda tool, or for the Americans or for the US to say we're winning the fight, or does IS simply say, well, where I was, there'll be another one springing up?
There's a bit of both in that. There'll always be someone who they'll have in place. I mean, they have this very good, as I said, machine in getting their message across from online magazines, but also it gives out this message. You might be in an area like Raqqa, in the heart of that caliphate that they've got, but you're not going to be out of reach, and eventually we will find you, and we will get you. And I think that's the message the US has certainly given out, and we've seen it from Iraq onwards, that it can take time, but eventually they'll find you and they'll get you.
There, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's 7:15. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. That is our main story this morning. US forces have carried out an airstrike in Syria targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
Storm Abigail sweeps across parts of the UK, bringing with it winds of more than 80 miles an hour. And who better tell us about the storms than Carol this morning? We saw Lorna a little while ago up in the Highlands, and they're still seeing the after effects, really, aren't they? The storm has been pretty intense.
That's right, Charlie, it has. In fact, Abigail is now starting to weaken, but she is still packing a punch. You can see just by looking at the pressure chart all the isobars across the UK. Wherever you are today, it's going to be windy. We've also got this weather front moving from west to east across England and Wales. That's going to bring some heavy, squally, thundery showers. And in the north of the country, across northern Scotland, as well as the wind, we also have some showers which are falling as snow above 400 metres and lying across the hills of Scotland. But for Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales, it's more likely to be a transient thing. So you can see as we've gone through the night, we've had, as well as the very gusty winds, touching 84 miles an hour in some parts of the Western Isles, we've had a lot of rain. So the combination of that and the squally showers crossing England and Wales this morning does mean it could lead to some very tricky travelling conditions. You can find out what's happening where you are on your BBC local radio station. Now, as we go through the course of the morning, the winds will very, very slowly start to moderate. Where we've had the storm force winds across the far north of Scotland, that will take the longest, of course, for them to moderate. We've also got this band of rain moving from the west towards the east. So if we start off in Scotland, as we go through the course of this morning, we are still looking at a lot of showers. It's going to feel much colder today than we've been used to. And across northern England, we've also got this line of heavy showers depositing on the tops of the Lake District Mountains, tops of the Pennines, some snow. And then as we move down towards the south, that line of shower continues. It's moving from the west towards the east. So although it might be dry where you are in the east, it might even be bright where you are, the rain is going to come your way with squally winds. And when you hear us saying squally winds, it means sudden bursts of very gusty winds. So there that goes as we go through the course of the day. Behind it, we see some dry conditions. We also see some sunshine, but there will still be some showers, and some of those showers will be on the heavy side. Now, with the wind, temperatures looking today between about 6 and 12 Celsius, but it will feel much colder than that. Now, this isn't unusual for this time of November, but it's unusual for us because we've been so spoilt by the milder conditions of late. Then as we head on into the weekend, we're not done with the wet and the windy weather. We've got this area coming in from the Atlantic. It's got tropical moisture mixed in, so the temperature will go up. But look at those isobars. Again, it is going to be windy, but it's the rain this weekend that's causing us concern, particularly across southwest Scotland, northwest England, and also North Wales. So if we take a look at that, you can see how it starts off dry and bright in eastern areas. Here comes the rain. There will be an exceptional amount of rain, not just as we head through Saturday, but those totals will continue as we move on into Sunday as well. It could lead, particularly across northwest England and North Wales, to some problems with surface water flooding, possibly even some rivers bursting their banks. So do keep in touch with the weather forecast. South of that, drier, still breezy, mild. North of that, the temperature going up as the rain does approach. So there's a lot of weather for the next few days.
A lot of weather. Carol, when's it going to get cold and crispy?
Oh, I'm hoping Christmas. I want a white Christmas, Charlie. I don't know about you, but we're hanging on to these mild conditions, although today we're having a touch of what we should have at this stage of the year.
OK, Carol. See you later on. Thank you.
I don't want it crispy and cold.
I like it like that.
You surprised me. Time now, 19 minutes past 7. We've had an announcement from the Treasury. It involves mortgages that Northern Rock was looking after during the financial crisis. Ben has the details. Morning.
Yeah, an announcement, a big announcement this morning that the government has sold £13 billion worth of mortgages that were formerly owned by the Northern Rock. Now, a bit of a history lesson. You'll remember back in 2008, Northern Rock went bust at the height of the financial crisis. It involved tens of billions of pounds of bailouts from the taxpayer, and it meant that the bank was split into two. The good good bit, the bit that was working, was eventually sold off to Virgin Money. That bit is doing fine. Remember that at the height of the financial crisis, there was a huge problem with mortgages, that they weren't being paid back. People weren't unable to repay those mortgages. They were bundled all together, stuck in a vehicle called UK Asset Resolution. It was the bad bit of the bank, the toxic bit of the bank, and the government held on to those. They've now said they're in a position whereby those mortgages are healthy enough, people are able to start paying them back, and they've been sold to the private sector, to Cerberus, for £13 billion. The government pointing out that is the largest ever financial asset sale by a government in Europe.
Interesting, there's an appetite for these sales. I mean, it just brings back to life the idea that there is still business to be made out of these mortgages. There's still money to be made out of these.
Yeah, I mean, we think of it's that strange concept of selling debt, but clearly people make money from it because the interest you pay on a mortgage, that is the profit margin for the business. So what they've said here is, look, we're in a position whereby you're making enough money from these mortgages, therefore there's an appetite, someone wants to buy it, Cerberus wants to buy it. We know already they've got quite a good track record of hanging on to mortgages, turning around those funds and making money from them. So this is good news because it gets at £13 billion off the government's books. That money will now be used, of course, in the spending review at the end of the year, so particularly timely and good news, of course, for the government.
Ben, thanks very much.
Let's see, the time now is 7:21. They're the historic buildings which have become the scene of period dramas, weekend trips, but there's no warning that visiting stately homes could become a thing of the past.
The Historic Houses Association says that they're just too big and expensive for anyone to run, and 70 of them could be closed to the public in the next 5 years.
Our reporter Lucy Burton is at Arley Hall, that's in Cheshire, and we can speak to her now. Which room are you in now this morning, Lucy?
Well, Charlie, I'm in the library of Arley Hall. It's been in the family for the last 550 years. So it's not too much of a stretch of the imagination to imagine the past lords sitting down at their table, writing the letters and managing the estate. But of course, like a lot of these great houses, it's had a fair amount of problems over the last few hundred years. In the 1960s, the family had to move out because it simply fell into disrepair. And then in the 1980s, they found that dreaded dry rot. And that's a story that's really been replicated up and down the country in these kind of stately homes. And I travelled across the Pennines to find one that's particularly struggling.
Wentworth Woodhouse is the largest privately owned house in the country, wider even than Buckingham Palace. It's just been bought for over £8 million by a Hong Kong-based investment company. Perhaps the new owners were attracted to its incredible history. It's supposed to be the inspiration for Jane Austen's Pemberley. But the days of glamorous balls and dashing heroes are long gone. After the war, the family could no longer enjoy looking out onto Green Parkland. Their front lawn was mined for coal, so they stared down on Britain's biggest open-cast pit.
The house was bought in 1999 by the architect Clifford Newbold. His plan was to save it from rack and ruin. But the new owners will have a pretty steep repair bill as well. It's thought it will cost £50 million to restore this house to its former glory.
Despite assurances from the company, there have been concerns from the heritage sector and local residents about the new owners. Do they have the will to keep restoring the house? And will it still be part of the community?
As long as they sort of make sure it's more accessible to the public, really, because it's such a beautiful building. It would be a shame.
I think it's got quite an attachment to people. We've all got used to it being there and how beautiful it is, and we do come quite regularly through here, and we're just quite we're curious really what's going to happen to it and what it's going to turn into.
The new owners, Lake House Group, say they want to work with heritage organisations in order to save and preserve this magnificent house. But the fact is that these old homes cost a mind-boggling amount to run, as the director of the neighbouring estate explains.
The great houses weren't built by people who had to worry about money, so that they aren't naturally easy to care for or maintain. And you do have to take quite a rigorous commercial approach to succeed in caring for the heritage. When you add heritage to the cost of anything, the costs suddenly start to skyrocket.
For many stately homes, these costs are skyrocketing very quickly. There's a new warning that 20% of them are drowning under the bills and could start to close within the next 5 years. And that's very bad for local economies.
We employ 41,000 full-time equivalents people, and that equates to £286 million into the economy. They're absolutely crucial drivers.
Campaigners hope the government will step in to help ease the pressure. But in the meantime, maybe it is rich foreign investors who can ride to the rescue of these old damsels in distress. Well, Arley Hall is a damsel in distress no longer. That's where I am now. And that's because the family have thought of different ways to diversify to pay off that rather astronomical maintenance bill. But bodies like the Historic Homes Association worry that not every estate's able to do that. They say if they're not given help to balance their budgets, these houses will be lost to the public and, more crucially, lost to the local economy as well.
Thank you very much, and you'll back with you a little later on. More of a look around the house then. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Beautiful house, isn't it? Beautiful. Just come on breakfast. Of course, it's Children in Need this evening. We've been getting into character for the theme of childhood heroes. Can you guess which one's Bill's? I mean, it's not difficult, is it?
Yes, the idea is that you dress up as your childhood hero, whoever that might be, and Bill's gone for the full mask and all the guns, and it's the Lone Ranger, of course.
Of course.
The white Stetson hat.
We're going to show you who we all decided to dress up as. Some interesting choices, I think. We'll show you those throughout the programme. Now, though, it's time to get the news, travel and weather where you are.
Good morning from BBC London News. I'm Alex Bushell. A boy has been remanded in custody following a stabbing at a school in southwest London. It happened in the lobby of Southfields Academy in Wandsworth on Tuesday afternoon. A 16-year-old has been charged with grievous bodily harm. The 15-year-old pupil is, though, expected to make a full recovery. The consumer group Which has called for a crackdown on ticket resale websites, claiming customers face a stitch-up. It says it found examples of tickets being put on sale before the official release date and restrictions on their resale being ignored. The industry says it has high levels of consumer protection and is committed to transparency. Banking, medicine, teaching and law are the most popular career aspirations for teenagers in the capital. That's according to the company behind the country's biggest jobs and careers fair. Skills London is free to attend and is taking place today at the Excel Centre. Organisers say around 45,000 jobs and apprenticeships will be on offer. OK, well, it's that time of year again. Children in Need takes place tonight. Thousands of Londoners have been raising money for this year's appeal, with proceeds going towards helping children across the capital. Later, here on BBC London, we'll be live at Tower Bridge, and we'll also be speaking to some of the charities and fundraisers involved. OK, well, let's have a quick look at the travel situation this morning then. First, a look at the Tube and the travel board. As you can see there is, yes, look, there we go, a good service on all lines. Elsewhere and on the roads, Blackwall Tunnel is queuing northbound, as you'd expect. That's from the Eltham Tunnel. That's after a breakdown, though, halfway through the tunnel. And as you can see in the top left corner of the screen, that's the end of the queue. Elsewhere, the A40 eastbound is slow into town from RAF Northolt to Hanger Lane. In Moorgate, the traffic lights aren't working at Ropemaker Street. In Stockwell, there are roadworks too on the A203 Stockwell Road between the Stockwell station there and Clapham Road. And finally, Camberwell New Road, roadworks there again, this time closing a lane by Camberwell Station Road. Well, how have we been affected by the bad weather? Let's have a chat now with Elizabeth Rizzini.
Hello, good morning. It's been very mild so far this week, but today is going to feel an awful lot colder. A very blustery day, feeling an awful lot more like November, and there will be some rather strong gusts of wind as well as some showers at times. But it's a dry, bright early start, some sunshine around. Then we get this line of very squally showers come through the late morning. A drier afternoon. There will be the odd isolated shower here and there. Top temperatures today much lower than they have been, between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. So feeling a lot cooler too through the course of the night. In fact, a distinctly chilly start to the day tomorrow. We'll see a few showers around at times, temperatures down to, well, perhaps as low as 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, even in some of the towns. So for tomorrow then, we've got some milder air coming through eventually. That's going to come through on this weather front here that will give us some outbreaks of rain on and off through the course of the day. Some rather blustery westerly winds still, but generally the temperatures picking up as we head through the weekend. Sunday is going to be a slightly drier day. There'll still be some grey skies around and some outbreaks of drizzle at times. A rather strong strong, brisk westerly winds. And this is the picture as we head into the rest of next week as well. So temperatures coming up from tomorrow.
Well, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in around half an hour. Now, though, time to hand you back to Charlie and Naga.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
Time now is coming up to 7:30. Let's bring you up to date with the main news. The Pentagon has announced that US forces have carried out an airstrike targeting the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John.
It happened near the Syrian city of Raqqa and was aimed at a vehicle. A worldwide hunt was launched for Mohammed Amwazi after he was seen in videos of the beheadings of Western hostages. Our North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue is in Washington for us this morning. So, Gary, just take us through the sequence of events as we understand them. The news just coming out in the early hours of this morning.
Yeah, we're learning more and more detail as time goes by and as we manage to speak to some people in the region and also here in Washington. And what seems to have happened is that when darkness fell on Thursday evening local, this drone, which had been tracking Jihadi John for some time, hit him basically in a vehicle in Raqqa, which is the headquarters of Islamic State in Syria. I've just been told that there was possibly one, possibly two other people in that vehicle as well, and they say it was a great hit. Someone said to me. In other words, it was a direct strike, they think, and it was a Hellfire missile, which is fired from one of these drones that they use to deliver those particular types of missile. Now, so that took place, and what they say, they haven't actually asserted that he's definitely killed, but they're saying they're trying to verify all that. There's a high degree of certainty, they claim, but they'll go through a process now of assessing the intelligence on the ground, listening to phone calls, text messages, to try and assert whether they actually got their man. And if they did, it will be a very significant moment because he was a high-value individual in the parlance of the US military.
Yes, and Gary, Barack Obama, amongst other American politicians, had made the point that he and others would always remain in their targets.
Yes, I mean he sprung to infamy, if you like, Jihadi last autumn when he was pictured in those terrible, horrific videos of the Western hostages who ended up being beheaded, and he was seen as the face of the propaganda war, if you like, a very successful propaganda war that was thought to have done wonders for their recruiting ability to bring people into Islamic State. So it's not so much that he was seen as a high-value soldier, but as the face propaganda war, they will be very, very keen to have got him, and they'll be delighted if they have.
Gary, for the moment, thank you.
The BBC has learned that ministers are considering whether homeopathy should be added to a blacklist of treatments that doctors in England are banned from prescribing. Homeopathy is based on the idea that diluting substances which cause illnesses can help people to heal. So an example is using pollen to help cure hay fever.
The couple who killed Becky Watts will be sentenced today at Bristol Crown Court. Early this week, a jury took less than 4 hours to find 28-year-old Nathan Matthews guilty of his stepsister's murder and 21-year-old Shauna Hall guilty of manslaughter. The teenager was strangled to death in February. Her body was found with more than 40 injuries.
Police officers in England and Wales could need a degree-level education under plans being put forward by the College of Policing. The organisation says the job is as difficult as professions which only accept graduates, but at the moment only a minority of successful candidates have degrees. The Police Federation says the plan would exclude hard-to-reach groups and those who can't afford to pay for a university course.
The effects of Storm Abigail are being felt in the north of Scotland and across the Western Isles, Orkney and Shetland. The 70 schools have been closed and hundreds were left without power in the Western Isles overnight. 400 homes were also cut off in Shetland following a lightning strike. At its peak, gusts of 84 miles an hour were recorded in the Outer Hebrides.
Ministers investigating the failed charity Kids Company says that it is staggering that the government gave it more than £40 million of public money over 13 years. The report from the Public Accounts Committee has been published as further claims have emerged from a former worker at the charity about inappropriate spending.
Sir Terry Wogan's been forced to pull out of presenting this year's Children in Need because of back problems.
He's hosted every live show since the event began in 1980. He said in a statement, "I'm going to miss our wonderful, inspiring evening together, but I'll be with you watching, cheering and donating to a magnificent cause. We wish him a speedy recovery."
Absolutely. We'll have more on Children in Need a little later on in the programme. Right now, Mike Sear with the sport. Morning.
Yes, good morning. Matt Dawson, I was listening to the former rugby star for England, was urging the selectors who are going to pick the new manager to replace Stuart Lancaster to be arrogant, to splash the cash, to spend the money on getting the best in the world.
Haven't they said that money's no object?
Yeah, money isn't any object. They are one of the richest nations in the world in terms of rugby. And so, actually, this chap, Jake White, he does fit the bill. He was twice named the Rugby World Coach of the Year, the World Coach of the Year as well. Won the World Cup with his host nation, the home nation, South Africa, when it was played in France in 2007. So, the most important thing as well is that he quite fancies the job, unlike some in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah, Jake White has told the BBC he would take the job of England head coach if he was offered it, but he won't actually be applying. Why? Well, the South African won the World Cup as coach of the Springboks in 2007, but he's been turned down for the England post twice in the past. He stated he could win the World Cup for England as well if he's chosen to replace Stuart Lancaster. White, for the moment, is in charge at Montpellier in France.
Yes, in terms of that, if they had asked me and if they're genuinely interested and they thought I was the right guy, it would be an honour to be involved with a side like England. But, it's a long shot off. No one's come to ask me anything, so at this point in time, it's all just media hype. I've gone public many times to say this is a sleeping giant. It's one of the top sporting jobs in the world.
Well, White's current team, Montpellier, were well beaten by Harlequins at the Stoop last night in the European Challenge Cup. England captain Chris Robshaw scored the final try for Quins in a 41-18 victory. Now, the unbeaten run of England's footballers will be severely tested tonight by the European champions Spain. It is a friendly on the Costa Blanca as preparations begin in earnest for next summer's European Championships in France. England, haven't lost a match since their awful World Cup in Brazil. And while Captain Wayne Rooney is in Alicante with the squad, he won't feature in tonight's match. And Leicester's Jamie Vardy is also a doubt.
I think there's lots of players who, in the space of the last 2 or 3 months since the start of the season, have really shown themselves to be very, very serious competitors for a place in the starting lineup. So these 2 games give us the ideal opportunity, because anyone who gets his chance against either Spain or France and then goes onto the field and takes that chance and comes off the field having played well is obviously going to be that one step further forward, if you like, for being considered next summer.
Wales face the Netherlands tonight, and how quickly the football tables can turn. The Dutch World Cup semi-finalists just last year are missing out on Euro 2016. They haven't qualified, but Wales have. They can boast about that tonight. Nevertheless, the Wales manager Chris Coleman is wary of the threat the Dutch will pose.
We're up against good opposition. The fact they never qualified, they're almost rebuilding, but nevertheless they're going to be a wounded animal and a dangerous one at that. So we know it'll be tough, but it's a game we're going into expecting to perform like we've always done, and that's do our best and try and get a result.
Like Wales, Northern Ireland are heading to their first European Championship finals. Their warm-up begins tonight as well, with the visit of Latvia to Belfast.
It's important for us to win and continue with the run of form that we're in. Winning breeds confidence, it breeds belief, and this team has come a long way in the last 15, 18 months, and we want to continue with that. We want to go into France. This is the first step in terms of the preparation for France, so we want to continue with that.
Now in tennis, Andy Murray has avoided Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer in the draw for the end-of-season ATP Tour finals. The world number 2 will face Rafael Nadal, though, so no easy task, with Stan Wawrinka and David Ferrer making up his 4. Last year, Murray didn't make it out of his group, losing to Federer and Kai Nishikori. Finally, he's only 15 years old, but the Chinese schoolboy Yan Bingtao has caused a huge shock in Coventry at snooker's Champion of Champions event. He knocked out Shaun Murphy, the current world number 4. Murphy was the world champion as well in 2005 when Bingtao was just 5 years old. Yan was later beaten by Australian Neil Robertson, who won 6-3 to set up a semi-final against Joe Perry. And it's now back to school in China for Yan to complete his studies. But he'll certainly have something to tell his teachers about if they do show and tell.
How old was he?
He's 15. So what's scary is that next year, so he goes back to school now in China. We won't hear of him now until next summer in 2016. Then he'll become the first active professional snooker player born in the 21st century. which kind of makes you feel rather old, doesn't it? So already, you've got
There's
an active
always someone
professional baldness
snapping at your
surgeon.
heels, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Just got to remember
I know.
that, really.
Taking your title, taking your Not, I don't know. Are you good at snooker?
I enjoy it. Pool's
Cool,
easier. Easier.
But you know, it's not. I don't know if it's that case. You know, when you play your nephew at Christmas and you let them win. I don't think it was quite like that. I think you generally beat them.
Never let them win.
Don't you?
No.
I do. Too soft, I know.
Thanks very much, Mike. Time now is 21 minutes to 8. Carol's going to keep us updated with the weather. We've had Storm Abigail and Storm Kate is making an impact as well. We'll talk to Carol shortly.
1 in 200 babies in the UK are stillborn. That's around 3,600 a year. Now the government says it wants to halve that figure.
The Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, is pledging £4 million of funding to hospitals in England for state-of-the-art equipment and extra training.
Dr. Alexander Heasel from Tommy's Stillbirth Research Centre joins us now, along with Rupal Shah, who lost her first baby at full term 11 years ago. Thank you both very much for joining us. Rupal, possibly, if you'd tell us, first of all, what happened to you. This is 11 years ago.
11 years ago. I'd got to 41 and a half weeks. I was being induced. And very soon, once the process had started, Dylan's heart rate just stopped, the trace stopped. And we thought he'd kicked the monitor off, which, had been happening along the pregnancy. The midwife tried to put it back on, all very easy. And after a few moments, she said, "Do you know what? I'll go and get my colleague. She's a bit more experienced." And I should have realised something was amiss. Another midwife came to check, and she said, "Tell you what, we'll go and get the portable scanner." Blamed the equipment, and eventually, when we went into the scan room, I don't know, 15 minutes later, it might even have been 10 minutes. You lose track of time. The sonographer confirmed his heart had stopped and he had died.
Well, it's such a traumatic experience for you. I mean, obviously, very, very difficult time. You presumably became aware subsequently, if you didn't know before, that how many stillbirths there are in the UK, that you're one of many.
Absolutely. I think the initial days, it was just me and my husband. We were in a daze. It doesn't happen. How can it happen? But actually, you just lose all perception of everything that's going on. Bit by bit, as I became involved with the charity SANS as a volunteer and just working with local midwives and healthcare professionals, I realised this happens a lot, too much.
Dr. Heasel, Jeremy Hunt has announced these plans to give more money to NHS England to work on stillbirths and preventing more stillbirths. What do you think needs to be done?
I think this investment is really welcome. I think we're aware of some improvements that have been developed and can be made to stop families going through the pain of stillbirth. And one of the advantages that we have is that within areas of the NHS there's really good bits of practice, and what we want to do is to make sure everyone is doing the same high standard.
I suppose, Rupal, I don't know if you were given any reason for Dylan's death, the stopping of his heart, because so often stillbirth is unexplained, isn't it? I mean, it was the very last moment of your pregnancy. There was no reason, I'm assuming, for you to assume anything would have gone wrong. So how could that have been prevented? How can funding be used to prevent something so that you can't predict almost?
So although some cases are unexplained, we know that also some cases of stillbirth happen because we miss a baby that's in distress. We miss a baby that isn't growing normally in the womb. And actually, in Manchester at St Mary's Hospital, we've done a lot of work in reviewing all the babies that die, trying to understand as much as we can. And actually, in units where that happens, the stillbirth rate very often goes down. And we've also able to put in the research at the Tommy's Manchester Research Centre to better understand and better find those babies that are compromised and are at risk of dying. And in our unit, we've seen the stillbirth rate fall by 22% since 2010. So we can see a significant reduction, and I think it's about learning from units where things are going well and generalising that across the board.
Rupal, from the campaigning work you've done, have you yet been able to find a reason why in the UK and England particularly we have lagged behind? Because clearly presumably the medicine, the science, the knowledge is universal. Has it yet been accounted for as to why the figures are higher here than they are in other parts of Europe and the developed world?
No, I mean, you know, I do a lot of work with midwives and doctors, and very sadly I think about a third of the babies dying after 37 weeks gestation, which is huge. You know, and maybe if there was some slightly earlier intervention, I don't know, a scan at the right time, or, you know, something to identify the low-risk pregnancies. You know, high-risk mums are sort of tough, but you don't know you're high risk until you become high risk.
Doctor, do you want to pick up on that? I mean, is there something in that? Because clearly something has, if not now, but certainly in the past, been a problem in the way that this is looked at.
So the statistics from 2011 that showed that we were 33rd out of 35 high-income countries have precipitated quite a lot of the action that has happened and obviously culminated in today's announcement. But we don't really have a great handle on why we are worse than, say, countries like Norway and Sweden. Some of those things may be extra scans, and we need to show that they're cost effective and they would save babies' lives in the UK. It may be population differences, those sort of things. We know, for example, that smoking is a big risk factor for stillbirth, and if nobody smoked in pregnancy, the proportion of stillbirths that were preventable is about 7%. So it may be differences in things like that between populations.
Rupal, what about funding? I know funding now is towards medical help during the pregnancy, but after, when Dylan was born, you didn't get to spend as much time with him as perhaps you could have done or you wanted to.
No.
What about that funding to go towards the education, that side of such a tragedy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know locally things have changed because we've worked really hard with our local professionals to make that happen. So now parents are, I hope all parents are offered, you know, would you like to see your baby back? I know when my son was born, I was drugged up. I was not there really. And I have visions, you know, I can look down on myself, but not really remember what I was feeling. Parents are now offered, you know, would you like your baby back? Which is so important. But if the midwife doesn't know, if the training isn't in place to actually make that happen, awareness, a lot of training is needed, and we need to do it at the right time, really.
Rupal, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Doctor. Thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Time now is 13 minutes to 8. We've been talking about Storm Abigail and Storm Kate, and Carol's been keeping the cross. We've had gusts of winds, Carol, haven't we? Winds about 84 miles per hour from Abigail?
That's absolutely right. That was yesterday evening in the Outer Hebrides, Naga, and this morning we've had gusts of 81 miles an hour in Lerwick. You can see Abigail is taking a northeasterly track, but if you just follow all the isobars across the UK, wherever you are, it's going to be a windy day, but particularly so for a time yet across the north and west of Scotland. Very slowly today, the wind will moderate. But having said that, it still is going to be a fairly blustery day. And for some of us, we've got some squally showers. So we've got showers across Scotland and also Northern Ireland. And we've got this line of showers coming in across Wales and Western England. So if you are travelling, some of the showers will be heavy with hail and thunder. Coupled with the squally winds, it could lead to some tricky travelling conditions. And you can find out more about where you are on your BBC local radio station or the travel pages of the BBC website. So picking up that line that's moving across Wales and England, you can see how it continues to journey eastwards through the course of the day. Behind it, some drier conditions, but also some more showers to come, some of which will also be heavy. The wind very slowly moderating across Scotland too. And here we're looking at a cold day as we are across the whole of the UK, but we'll have some snow across Scotland, particularly lying snow above about 400 metres. At lower levels, there'll be some winteriness through the course of today. That's going to be a mixture of sleet and hail. Now, as we come across Northern England, it's across the Pennines, the mountains in the Lake District, for example. Northern Ireland, the tops of the mountains here too, will see some snow, but that will be a transient feature. And then we've got some sunnier skies, but still showers, still blustery across Wales and southwest England, and the showers continuing to push steadily towards the east. When you hear us talking about squally winds, what we mean is that It's a sudden burst of a gusty wind and a strong one. And in that wind today, it's going to feel cold, colder than the temperatures of 6 to 12 suggest. This is how it will feel. Now, it's not unusual at this stage in November to have snow in the hills in the north. Neither is it unusual to have temperatures below double figures. But it's different from what we've been used to, so you will notice it if you're just stepping out. Then as we head on through the weekend, we've got our next deep area of low pressure coming our way. In that, we've got some tropical air mixed in, so the temperature will go back up again. But we've also got weather fronts. They're going to produce some heavy rain, more on that in a second. But you can see in the southern edge of the low pressure, we also do have tightly packed isobars. So once again, it's going to be windy, more especially in the south. So we've got all this rain coming in from the Atlantic during the course of Saturday after a dry start in the east. And it's not just on Saturday. As we move into Sunday, we'll still have that rain moving northwards across parts of Scotland. So the Met Office has weather warnings out for southwest Scotland, Northern England, particularly northwest England and North Wales, because we're going to see an exceptional amount of rain. It may well lead to some surface water flooding, possibly some river flooding as well. So do keep in touch with the weather forecast. Charlene, I get back to you.
Carol, thank you very much.
An Italian company has told staff not to send any internal emails this week. Could you cope with that?
Yes.
You
I would so
couldn't
like
you?
that. Well, it sounds like a great idea. Ben, is this to do with stress levels, or is it about stopping people wasting time?
A bit of everything, actually. That idea that your inbox is deluged with these emails, half of them you don't need, half of them you can deal with at another time. And this company in Italy managed to do this, but it's a bit too early to tell whether it actually managed to reduce stress levels. Good morning. It is an interesting one, this, isn't it? We've all felt it. This Italian textile company wanted to assess the stress levels of its staff, and many of them said there were simply too many internal emails to have to wade through every day. And so the firm decided to ban all of those internal emails for a week. Now, as I said, it's too early to say whether that actually helped to make their company a bit calmer and less stressful. But the big question, should businesses here follow that Italian example?
Email, I definitely have a love-hate relationship with it. I do think sometimes it's quite enjoyable to tick things off a list, and I like to flag them up and make sure that everything's being done. At the same time, when they're all coming in your inbox at once, can we feel a little bit overwhelming?
It doesn't stress me out looking at my emails. I like to prioritise them quite well, and then once I've actioned them, delete them, and you can just move through them quite methodically.
I think the idea of living without email for a week, part of me would absolutely love. Another part of me would actually feel frustrated because there's parts of that allow me to work to my full capacity getting information across.
If you said I couldn't access my emails for a week, I don't think it would help me relax.
The views of some of you in Manchester there. Well, Hazel Carter-Showell is Managing Director at Carter Coulson. She's a business psychologist. Morning.
Yes, morning.
Brilliant story, this, because it's something we'll all have felt, won't it? I suppose the big question, can it actually work? Because there's a reason that we get a lot of emails, because our boss wants to tell us something. But can this experiment work?
We can. The studies have shown that cortisol levels drop, heart rate drops, if we get about, less emails, but also check them less times a day. So there's a chance that we'll hear later today that it did actually help.
The technology has made these things possible. We carry our phone around with our work email on all the time. We're always in the office, the email pings up, you feel you've got to respond to it. That means that technology has made the workplace a much more stressful place.
Yeah, sadly it does. And because the costs on the receiver are not the sender, we've got this sense of we have to respond within 24 hours. And again, there's that pressure to feel like we've got to reply absolutely immediately. And that's what the stress levels are linked to, is that feeling of it's interrupting my day, I've got to respond immediately, rather than I can just park that. Because that's when the emails are all right, when we feel like I can put that to one side and come back to it later. Unfortunately, we don't feel like that's possible sometimes.
Is there an element to, we're often told this, aren't we? Get up from your desk, walk to the other side of the office and chat to that person who's there and not to email them. But we've just been talking about that could actually be worse, could it?
Yeah, well, it can be just the same, and that's the problem, because if you're really in the middle of concentrating, the stress levels are raised by being disrupted in your work, not necessarily what by. So if somebody comes and you're really concentrating and said, can I just have a moment? Well, that's just as stressful. Or if the phone rings, it's the multitasking and having to switch your attention really rapidly from one thing to another. That's what gets the heart going up and your cortisol level rising. So yeah, that's the problem.
Is there a generational divide here too, that older people find it a little bit more stressful to deal with that deluge of emails, whereas maybe the younger generation are used to looking at Twitter and Facebook and all of this information coming in all the time? They're more able to process and deal with it.
It can be. We certainly know that when you take the younger generations off things like the social media, that's when you can see stress levels starting to rise, particularly because of things like the fear of missing out. What am I missing? What am I not seeing? Because I'm not plugged in.
Really briefly, your top tips, and if you're a boss sending emails to your firm, what should you do or not do?
Think about the person you're sending to. If they don't need it, don't send it. Don't send it for your ego or your needs. No backcovering, and certainly no big CCs. If you had to count for £1 for every email you sent and the cost of the salary of the person reading it, you'd really think twice about a lot of these emails.
Okay, Hazel, good advice as always. And we've just been discussing, do not overuse the phrase urgent in the subject line. That is the most overused phrase. Hazel, thanks so much. That's all from me. More a little later.
Ben, thank you very much.
I'm just sending Charlie an email. It's urgent.
As usual, it won't be read. No change there. No change there.
I'll just carry on with that. Okay.
Ben, thanks very much. See, 7:54 is the time now.
Folklore, flying fish, fog. They're all transforming the city of Durham this weekend at the 4th Lumiere Festival.
The event showcases light installations from artists all over the world. This year, organisers expecting record visitors.
For the first time, the event's also going to travel to London. Fiona Trott has more.
What you can see now is Lambton Worm, which is obviously a very famous local tale from the northeast, where it terrorised local villagers. So we wanted to kind of put that into the piece as to be a bit terrifying for the children, shall we say?
That's a bit mean.
Well, yes, but give them a fright at night time.
On the river, a friendlier sight. These whale watchers weren't put off by the weather.
The sounds that you heard as the tail splashed into the water, it was just amazing, really. You could actually believe it was real.
The whole thing was fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
We come here every 2 years back to the city of Durham, where we started the festival in 2009. The people are fantastically welcoming. They turn the city inside out for us. And we get this incredible panorama, this landscape of really extraordinary, iconic buildings, countryside coming right into the city centre. And our artists come and reinvent the place through light every 2 years in the wintry darkness.
And with spectacular results. The festival goes to London in January. Fiona Trott, BBC News, Durham.
Amazing sights, I imagine that.
Time now to get news, travel and weather where you are.
Good morning from BBC London News. I'm Alex Bushell. A boy has been remanded in custody following a stabbing at a school in southwest London. It happened in the lobby of Southfields Academy in Wandsworth on Tuesday afternoon. A 16-year-old has been charged with grievous bodily harm. The 15-year-old pupil is, though, expected to make a full recovery. The consumer group Which has called for a crackdown on ticket resale websites, claiming customers face a stitch-up. It says it found examples of tickets being put on sale before the official release date and restrictions on the resale being ignored. The industry says it has high levels of consumer protection and is committed to transparency. Banking, medicine, teaching and law are the most popular career aspirations for teenagers here in the capital. That's according to the company behind the country's biggest jobs and careers fair. Skills London is free to attend and is taking place today at the Excel Centre. Organisers say around 45,000 jobs and apprenticeships will be on offer. Well, it is that time of year again. Children in Need takes place tonight. Thousands of Londoners have been raising money for this year's appeal, with proceeds going towards helping children across the capital. Later here on BBC London, we'll be live at Tower Bridge and speaking to some of the charities and fundraisers involved. OK, well, let's have a look at the travel situation this morning. Then you can see there from the travel board, there is a good service on all lines. Looking elsewhere, though, and on the roads, the A406 North Circular is congested in both directions. That's in the works between Neasden and Harrow Road, as you can see there from our travel camera. The Blackwall Tunnel is queuing as well. That's northbound from the Eltham Tunnel after a breakdown halfway through the tunnel. Moorgate, the traffic lights aren't working at Ropemaker Street. Stockwell, the A203 Stockwell Road has roadworks between the Stockwell Station and Clapham Road. And finally, Camberwell New Road, roadworks there as well. They're closing a lane by Camberwell